Oh, okay. Been a little while since we've done a live stream. A lot has happened since the last live stream that we did, and as you can see, I'm wearing my Euro 2008 top, which I've had for 17. Is it 17? Yeah, 17 years. I've had this T-shirt. Part of my memorabilia collection, so I thought I'd whack it on. Yeah, lots happened since we had the last live stream. A lot to discuss. Some really interesting things going on. I want to start with the FIFA Club World Cup and the viewership figures. So the final in the UK had 1.1 million people watching when Chelsea beat PSG, and England, Wales, and the Women's Euros had nearly 2.9, nearly 3 million viewers at peak viewership. So, yes, I know if you had the DAZN app, you could watch for free, but when ads came on, the screen would split. A lot of people found that quite distracting, but very limited viewership on Channel 5 here in the UK on free to wear. So, and a lot of people complained about the Club World Cup and the quality of matches we saw. The attendance was pretty bad. And there's a lot of questions coming out of that. And, looking at what fans have said and what feedback I've seen on social media from fans and on fan groups and on discussion pages, ticket pricing was all wrong. The kickoff times didn't suit the domestic US fan base and trying to get fans in the gates. Accessibility to and from stadiums, the transportation links, and a lot of other stuff. There was a lot of issues there, basically, and the weather delays had a massive impact. A lot of game time was lost because of bad weather. The heat was a problem, and so there was a lot of things that I think FIFA can and should learn for next year, and I do have some concerns about next year. So it's an interesting topic to discuss, and I'll be happy to answer any questions in regards to the FIFA Club World Cup. I'll be very, very happy to answer any questions. Now, before we dive into that, bit of housekeeping. Obviously, you've got to be subscribed for an hour to post a question or comment. That's just to keep the trolls and the idiots away, and we can have a good discussion then. Other than that, try and keep it sport related. We try and keep the politics out of it. If anyone starts posting political questions or political comments, they will not be answered, and it'd be wasting your time and mine. Other than that, crack on. Obviously, the FIFA Club World Cup's been a big discussion point. A lot of people didn't want to watch it. There was a lack of interest in it. And of course, it is seen as a bit of a dry run for next year's World Cup. Now, a problem with the FIFA Club World Cup is obviously the US was the sole host of that expanded tournament, and Canada and Mexico didn't host any games, so we don't know what issues the Canadian stadiums are going to face and the Mexican stadiums are going to face for next year as a dry run. Obviously, last year we had the Copa America, and there was issues there as well. And so FIFA's got a lot of things to try and get right. And I was scrolling through Instagram, and this reel popped up, and it was discussing the Kansas City pricing strategy. And I worry about the attendance next year. I wonder about the quality of the tournament we're going to get next year. It's going to be an interesting one. And unfortunately, politics does have a part to play, like with overseas fans going. We have seen a lot of issues with the US immigration policy and border policy in regards of foreign nationals coming to the US and the hold-ups at airports and the borders with TSA. So it's going to be an interesting one. I think the weather's going to have a massive impact. We saw that in the Club World Cup. A lot of matches were impacted by weather delays due to either thunderstorms or heat and having to suspend play or delaying of kickoffs, which is going to have an impact on the TV audience. Most European fans, the interest was not there. I don't know about how it was perceived in the US and what the American fan base felt about the tournament and what the engagement was with TV audience, streaming audience, fans and attendance. But a lot of American sports fans were like, the kickoff times just didn't suit locals because they were kicking off in the middle of the day when people are at work. The only people that in theory could really go would be retirees and grandkids. So that in itself poses a problem. And it just a halftime show for the final. Was that necessary? Most reaction was no. And it's just one of them, really. And the attendance was a massive problem. And that's not a good look when you're trying to sell the tournament to, for future years and trying to get more sponsors on board and broadcasters to buy in when you're not selling out the stadiums. It is a concern. And the thing was, in '94, when we had the World Cup in '94 in the US, attendance wasn't a problem. The quality of football wasn't great, but the attendance wasn't a problem. There were other issues with that World Cup, and I think it was more to do with the weather and the quality of football that we saw because of the heat and the facilities used. But yeah, there's everywhere I look on social media and on fan pages, there's a lot of concerns about what we are going to expect at next year's World Cup. So I'll be interested to see what people's views are on the FIFA Club World Cup and in regards to what we could expect next year, the quality of football we're going to see on the pitch next year, with it being an expanded tournament with 3 host nations. It's going to be an interesting one this time next year. What we as fans get to see on the TV, or those who are lucky enough to go. I mean, how much is it going to cost? Because ticketing pricing, there was one of the games they did dynamic pricing. They weren't selling enough tickets, so they massively slashed the prices to try and get more fans into the stadium. I think it was one of the Chelsea games in the knockout stages. They just could not sell tickets. They were priced too high, and the organisers were just like, "Well, let's slash the ticket price to get people through the turnstiles and into the stands to watch games." And looking at, for example, Kansas City as an example, I think the cheapest tickets a year before the tournament, they're planning to sell the cheapest tickets for nearly $400 and some of the more expensive box seats for $4,000 for group stage games. I'm not even sure locals are going to be willing to pay that kind of money to go to games, let alone overseas fans. I mean, people just do not have the spare money floating around to afford this kind of stuff. I mean, flights to the US are quite expensive. Accommodation at hotels is quite expensive. And, that's going to price a lot of potential fans who want to go out of going, quite frankly. Now, there are some other major sports stories to discuss as well. Obviously, we've seen Wimbledon. We've got the Tour de France ongoing. With the rugby league and the Australian side, they're still looking for a new head coach because Mal Meninga has now taken the Perth Bears job for 2027. And with the current rules that the Australian Rugby League Commission have in place, you cannot be a club coach and the test side coach at the same time. And so it's going to be very, very interesting who they end up appointing for the Kangaroos tour to England as head coach. And that's an open-ended question. There's a few names in the frame, but at the moment they haven't got a coach in place and a coaching setup in place for that 3-test tour in November. And the ticket sales have been really, really good, but they haven't got a coach yet. And so that's something that the AR Australian Rugby League Commission need to resolve. They need to get a coach in place, even if it's an interim coach just for the 3-test series. Of course, we've got the World Cup, Rugby League World Cup next year as well, and Australia are without a coach at the moment. So it's going to be interesting who ends up getting appointed to that position. And they need to get it right, because if they get it wrong, and that could have implications. All told, though, State of Origin, both in the men's and the women's, was highly entertaining this year. The winning side in both the men's and women's won 2-1. Obviously, New South Wales won the women's, Queensland won the men's. The quality that we saw was pretty good. You could definitely see the difference in quality of coaching. The players themselves, both states are actually pretty equal if you think about it in regards to the quality of players that take the field in state of origin. But you could definitely see with Queensland, they've got a bit more of a stable coaching setup. I think while Laurie Daly got game one right with his selections and then how the team played, they got blitzed in the first half in game two, had a good comeback in game two and could have won that. But game three, they just weren't on the same page. In regards to the NRL itself, I will be looking at where teams are at after 20 rounds. I'll be doing a video looking at the league position of teams right now and who I think is going to be in the top eight, who I think is going to fall out of the top eight, and who could be potential wooden spoonies, because there's a couple of sides in the NRL right now whose form just has nosedive off a cliff and are in deep, deep trouble. So that's going to be very, very interesting to look at. There's just so much to talk about. Obviously, the Women's Euros is still ongoing, and there's a big discussion about, obviously, Spain are still favourites. They haven't lost a game yet. I think they're the only unbeaten side left in the tournament. The other three sides have all lost games. I think England Italy is going to be a really interesting encounter. Germany, they somehow managed to steal a win against France against all the odds, but they're going to have to play a lot better if they are to compete against Spain in that second semi-final. The attendance has been really good in Switzerland, which is really good to see. That's backed up, the last Euros that we hosted here in England. And so the attendance is, it's the women's game has definitely grown massively. What I do find interesting with the women's game is the amount of penalties that have been missed so far. Ridiculous number of penalties missed. But when you look at, the league games across Europe, the success rate for penalties is around 90%. In the tournament, it's about 55, 60% after last night's shootout. And that drop-off is very, very noticeable. Now, obviously, it's been a long European season. The weather out there has been very, very hot, humid. So obviously, when you do get to a penalty shootout, or even in a normal 90 minutes, that fatigue factor does take effect. I still think that in regards to the offside law, then there needs to be a change in the offside law, because we've seen some brilliant goals ruled out offside when we're talking millimetres in it. So I do think we need to have a look at the interpretation of offside, the wording of the rule. I think that does need to be looked at as well. And there's a few areas, I think, with the VAR that there's still room for a lot more improvement. I'm also not a fan of the touch judges, the linos, doing the delayed offside raising of the flag. It doesn't matter if it's the men's game, women's game. That is asking for problems when players going for a challenge, players get injured, and then the flag goes up quite late. I think that's been a regular criticism of the instruction given down by the governing body to the officials to wait until you raise the flag late. To see how the play develops. I think just raise the flag quickly, get it up there quick. We have the semi-automated. The time taken to some of these VAR checks to get the decision right, while they are getting them right under the letters of the law, it's still taking too long. I think that is a problem. We need to speed up that process significantly, because it does seriously disrupt the flow of games. And because it's the women's game, I think it wouldn't get it's not getting as much attention as the men's. I do feel if that was a men's Euros or a men's World Cup, I think we'll be blowing up deluxe. And I think UEFA and FIFA realise that, and I think that's why the discussion is not getting discussed in the same level it should. I think you need to seriously look at the speed of decision making there. And of course the offside rule, because I do think before VAR was brought in, the benefit of doubt was given to the attacker, for one, and two, they've constantly tweaked the offside interpretation. Because when I was a kid growing up, you need to have a clear gap between attacker and defender. There needs to be a clear gap, clear visible gap, and then you can say the attacking player or players have gained an attacking advantage in that phase of play. I think we're too black and white. We're too rigid with it. And France had what looked like a perfect goal ruled out for being offside. I think that is ridiculous. That's not how the rule was written down originally and interpreted originally. I do think that's a downside with the bringing in of technology. We are getting, it's got to be perfect all the time. I think that takes a little bit away from the joy of the game. As a fan watching and players playing, I think there is some frustration there. And you can see why coaches get very, very frustrated with officials. And we've seen, coaches and team administrators blow up in regards to the officiating and how the implementation of the technology is being implemented and how the rules need to be completely reworked to suit the tech we have in place. I hope FIFA and the various domestic leagues and the confederations do look at this going into next year's World Cup before the World Cup kicks off. I think there needs to be some tweaks made, some changes made, and I think we will get a better product as a result when the opening game of the World Cup next year kicks off in June. I honestly think there needs to be further improvement. I've said all along since 2017, 2018, 2019, I think VAR had a good basis back then, all those years ago, and unfortunately I think we've muddled it too much. I think we've not got the implementation right. It is here to stay whether we like it or not, but I do think massive improvements do need to occur. And I think we'll eventually, when we do figure out a good way to get it working quicker and with a bit more common sense, I do think we will have a better product as a result. In regards to the quality of matches and tournaments, I do think in recent years the quality has declined on a playing standpoint and on a technical standpoint. I think we are playing too many games. I think the Champions League format, in my opinion, doesn't work as well as I think it was intended. I think we're playing, too many games in a more condensed schedule than what we were before. I think looking at the length of off-season some of these clubs are going to have, it's not going to be long enough. We've already having pre-season friendlies and European UEFA qualifiers for clubs going into the Conference League, Europa League, and Champions League. We're already having the qualifying stages for the group stage. So some clubs are already playing competitive matches in July, middle of July. That the off season and the pre-season isn't long enough. And we are seeing a higher rate of injuries with players and fatigue factor with players. And FIFA will say, but we've got the 5 substitution rule. We've expanded the number of substitutions. That can mitigate it. But when you've got high-profile players coming out and saying that we are playing too many games, our bodies are breaking down quicker, we're not having the recovery time that we used to have, you need to listen to, those at the coalface. When you've got Jurgen Klopp coming out and criticising the Club World Cup, its format, the amount of teams playing, and of course he works for the Red Bull Group, and obviously there were teams of the Red Bull Group, at the Club World Cup, and he's openly criticising the size of the tournament, the amount of games, the format. It tells you that those in charge of governing the game, running the game, are not in touch with those actually involved in the sport, fans, and it tells you all you need to know about where FIFA's and the various confederations, where their minds are at, which is money. These are organisations not run by sporting people. These are run by lawyers and business CEOs, and they're after money. They're putting money and that kind of thing before quality. They're putting quantity before quality. They're oversaturating the market, for example, and fans are switching off. The product is being damaged as a result of just too much. Too much is not necessarily more is not necessarily better. Sometimes less is more. And I do think the various footballing governing bodies from FIFA downwards have made a lot of mistakes in regards to the competitions they run. And as I say, the shortening of the off season and the pre-season, I don't think it's long enough. We're getting trophies awarded later in the year, for example. And for me, that is a problem because it impacts the quality of the product we as fans get to see week in, week out, be it in the regular club season or with the internationals that we see in too many international breaks, for example. The big tournaments like Euros, Copa Americas, and World Cups, the quality is not as good. Players are fatiguing quicker, and the pace of the game is not what it should be. I think players are overcoached as well. So you're coaching some of the flair out of some players. I think there's too much negative play. I think sometimes you need to get the ball up the pitch quicker. The slow, methodical tiki-taka style, possession-based, lengthy possession-based build-up with too many phases, I think is a problem. I think so many coaches are trying to copy what Spain and Barcelona did in the late 2000s, early 2010s. I think that that is, for me, anti-football. I think it takes away from the simplicity of the game, and it does lead to some very boring matches. And some very low-scoring matches as well. We want to see goals. We want to see excitement. Even a 0-0 can be highly entertaining if it's end-to-end and you've just got two goalkeepers who are standing on their heads and two sides, willing to counter-attack and play quickly. You don't get that with possession-based, slow build-up football. And asking the goalkeeper to basically be a sweeper as well as a goalkeeper and be all technical, sometimes just route one is the best way to go. Take some of that pressure off the goalkeeper. I think the sweeper is a dying position. There were some great sweeper, roving defensive midfielders, sweepers back in the day. We're not getting that type of player anymore who can take some of the pressure off the goalkeeper and distribute the ball with long raking passes or long, powerful driving runs from deep. I think that was an integral part of the game for me growing up watching. And some players really excelled at it, and some coaches really did employ that system very, very well. And it led to some very exciting play and some very exciting games. Even if the scoring was low, you had a lot of excitement. So that's something I think that, needs to be looked at. Moving on from football briefly until people start asking questions. Obviously, we've had the NBA draft, the NHL draft, the NFL draft. We've had free agency. It's now most of the major North American leagues off season, apart from Major League Baseball and the MLS. Major League Baseball's got a lot of issues. I think Major League Baseball is sliding towards a lockout in a couple of years' time. There seems to be no willingness to renegotiate the CBA or extend the CBA that's currently in place, which came out of the last lockout. And you've got two teams with major stadium issues, i.e. they're technically homeless, and playing in minor league facilities. And then you've got some other teams that have looming stadium problems in regards to getting new facilities built or existing facilities upgraded. And Major League Baseball is sliding towards a lockout. And I think there's a lot of problems there. And with the basic collapse of the local TV deal with Major League Baseball, I do think there's a ticking time bomb with baseball. It's definitely a sport that's sliding towards a work stoppage, and I think that's going to seriously damage the image of Major League Baseball. They're obviously trying to grow the sport outside and the league outside the US, obviously with the international series. They're obviously not coming to London until next year. I think that's a massive mistake not coming to London this year. They were planning to go to Paris, of course, until funding became an issue. Now, I've got mixed reviews and mixed thoughts on the London games so far. Obviously, they came in 2019. I think there was room for improvement. They didn't come back until 2023. I think that was a mistake. I think they could and should have come back earlier. Obviously, last year, I think there was a bit more of an improvement over the year before, if that's a fair assessment. But I still think with that, while I'm not a massive baseball fan, I do think Major League Baseball could make that London experience better. I think they could organise it and promote it better. I think they've made some big gaffes there. I also think with the media rights, burying it on the BBC iPlayer, for example, here in the UK, that doesn't help reach a wider audience. I think they could do better there. The games haven't been terrible. If you are a baseball fan, I don't think they've been bad games to watch. I think they have chosen the right teams to come to London so far, but they could do better with ticketing price. They could do better with media rights, promotion, um, and overall trying to just sell the product to not the existing fan base, but potential new fans. I think that's where the NFL, for example, with their London series, have done very, very well. They've now expanded that series to Germany as well. Whether American football is the best sport on earth, which it isn't, but the NFL have done very, very well in regards to growing their footprint in Europe, and not only catering to the existing fans that exist here, but getting new fans to buy into the NFL experience with the games they've been taking to London since 2007. That's 18 years they've been coming to London as of this October. And whether it's starting to reach its sell-by date, if you can think of it that way, in regards to the fan experience and the overall products, and has it now reached a point where the novelty's worn off a bit? Is it affordable to go to? There's a lad I know, he used to go to every single London series NFL game, and he's got a well-paying. He's a corporate accountant, so he's got a very, very well-paying job. He's in the corporate accounts department of a very large supermarket supermarket chain here in the UK. So he's on a good salary. He's very well paid, and he's even saying he can no longer justify the cost of going. So we've got to look at the ticketing price and how accessible it is for fans to go. I mean, they've got to look at their ticketing strategy for the NFL, in my opinion. And this is pre-COVID. A friend of mine who used to go to he went to every London NFL game from 2007 to I think about 2018. And then I think it was 2019 or 2018? I asked him, "Are you going to any of the NFL games this year?" And he went, "Nope, can't afford it. Can't justify the expense." Now, I don't know if he's been since then. I haven't seen him for a few years. But when you've got a die-hard NFL fan, and he is a Steelers fan, he's a die-hard NFL fan, and when you've got one of them who's a rusted on, he's got a well-paying job, so he's got a lot of money, he's got disposable income, or he did, because of his employment, saying it's getting too expensive to go. I can no longer justify going to 1, 2, 3, 4 games a year, however many are played in London. That tells you that I think the NFL are trying to milk a cash cow that can't be milked anymore. And it's getting expensive, and therefore you're pricing out potential new fans, and even pricing out existing fans, which is a problem. Don't get me wrong, the NFL has made a lot of money out of the London series. They've obviously expanded it. They've played in multiple stadiums around London, but that is a massive problem. Massive problem. So that's something to bear in mind going forward. Talking about stadiums and selling tickets and selling a product to both the domestic and overseas audience. Obviously, the Challenge Cup final, a lot of empty seats at this year's final between Hull KR and the Warrington Wolves. I think the weather had an impact. That while it wasn't the lowest attendance, I've discussed the attendance and the attendance issues at the Challenge Cup final. Again, Wembley Stadium does get regularly criticised by sports fans because it's a multi-purpose stadium that hosts many different types of sport. It's hosted rugby league, rugby union, American football, obviously association football. It's obviously the national stadium. But again, from what I gathered, a lot of rugby league fans go. The FA and Wembley don't get rugby league fans, and don't get the fan base. That was one of the comments left on one of the videos I did concerning the Challenge Cup final. And is it time for the RFL to move it away from Wembley to a more potentially suitable location in regards to geography? Because apart from the London Broncos, should the London Broncos get back to Super League, most, if not the majority of the teams are in Lancashire and Yorkshire. and Cheshire that will be competing in a Challenge Cup final. Could a facility further north be more suitable to host the final? And we talk about tradition and we can talk about history, but when you have been struggling to sell out the final for the best part of a decade, if not longer, and I did look back, and I looked back at the new Wembley from 2007 all the way through till now, every single final, and the attendance, that it's been dropping for some time. It hasn't been above 70,000 for the best part of a decade. I think the last time it was above 70,000 was 2017. I think maybe 2019. So there's definitely been an attendance drop off over the years, and you could argue, certain clubs playing in the final has led to less fans attending. A lot of people will point to the second Catalan final in 2018, which was the lowest attendance since World War II at the final. I think it was the lowest attendance since 1948. And so, because Catalan are playing in the final, that's why the attendance wasn't great. Yet their first Challenge Cup final was a sellout. So I don't buy that as a full excuse. You could buy it as a one-off, but then you've got more established foundation clubs playing in the final and fans not showing up. And that tells you something about how well promoted is the game, how affordable are the tickets and transportation to the game. Do fans have that disposable income? How is it being promoted? I mean, the fact, as soon as the Ashes series was announced, they put the tickets for the 3 tests up for sale, right? And pretty quickly, Wembley nearly sold out within the first few days of being up for sale, and Bramley-Moore Dock, the new Everton stadium, sold out. And I believe, what's the other? Is it Ellen Road, the other stadium? Basically, all 3 stadiums are pretty much sold out for that 3-test series against Australia in the autumn. But those are tickets being put up, for sale nearly a year in advance. Ticket sales been really, really good. And of course, when the Aussies come, the fans will turn out to see the best players from England, the best players from Australia, have 3 tests to knock lumps out of each other for 80 minutes at a go. But then I hark back to the Rugby League World Cup, and attendance wasn't great. And so Rugby League has an image problem. Are they promoting the game properly, pricing of tickets for big events? And even Wembley didn't even host the final for the Rugby League World Cup. It was Old Trafford, and we can argue about Old Trafford and the state of Old Trafford, and that facility needing massive upgrades and then refurbishment, and and the quality of the playing surface and the quality of the facility. But it's one of the biggest stadiums in the country with the highest average attendance when games are played there. But again, Old Trafford's got a lot of problems, and obviously Manchester United are planning to build a new stadium. It's going to cost them a lot of money. They claim they haven't got any money, and there's questions over who's going to fund, the replacement for Old Trafford and how that's going to be funded, and big discussion around that. So that there is a fair bit to consider. But yeah, there's always a lot of sport to talk about. I do think it's still really interesting that less than 100 days before this 3-match test series between Australia and England, Australia still do not have a head coach in place. I find that mad to me that, they haven't figured out who's going to be the head coach, even on an interim basis. There's been talk of Cameron Smith. There's been talk of one of the Origin coaches, most likely Billy Slater, as one of the contenders. They still have not figured out who is going to replace Mal Meninga. And because Mal Meninga has now been officially unveiled as the Perth Bears coach, under current rules, he cannot coach the test side. And I find that absolutely farcical that for 3 tests, there cannot be like a transition period. And I don't understand the logic behind it. You want to have the best coach available to coach your national side. And they won't even talk to Wayne Bennett because he's contracted to South. So I find that really bizarre, and it's not a good look for rugby league at a time when obviously the game is trying to grow its image globally. I think the NRL are doing a decent job in growing the game globally with the Vegas series and trying to at least not crack the US market, but get interest from the US and grow the global game. If you can get interest in the US, you will obviously increase the global reach of a sport. But to not have your test coach sorted out when you've got a major test series coming up in a couple of months is bizarre to me. Absolutely bizarre to me. And the Australian Rugby League Commission, I think they need to look at changing the rules potentially, because there's some really good coaches who are obviously contracted to clubs, and because of that, they can't coach. So that's an interesting one. Another topic I want to discuss, and I will do a video on, is where the NRL are going to place that 20th team. We know Perth Bears are going to be the next team entering the league as Team 18, even though they got the 19th licence, because PNG got their licence before in 27. In 2028, obviously the PNG team will be allegedly ready to enter the NRL, and that's with the new TV deal and the new CBA that will be negotiated. And we're yet to see what that new media rights deal and CBA is going to look like when we get to that point. And then we've got to figure out who the 20th team is going to be. And I think that will happen before 2030. I think within the next 5 years, we're going to have a 20-team NRL. It's going to be very interesting where they place it. I personally think a second team in New Zealand, I think would be logical in my opinion. I think with what the Warriors have done in recent seasons with really reigniting the rugby league fan base in New Zealand and having a quite a large following overseas as well, I think with the sacrifices made during the pandemic where games weren't being played in New Zealand, I think definitely a second team in New Zealand makes sense on a fan base point of view. Now, whether it can bring in the money on a corporate and sponsorship side is another thing, and TV audience, but I do think the fans will turn up. They'll fill whatever stadium they play in, and whatever city in New Zealand they play in, be it Wellington or Christchurch or Hamilton. I think they could sell out a stadium every week. Every home game will be sold out. It's just about, would it work on a corporate level? But then again, you could argue there are some teams in Sydney that don't have a lot of corporate money behind them, whereas there are other teams around the NRL that have a lot of financial backing behind them and are more financially stable. So that's obviously a concern that needs to be looked at and thought through. Talking about Australian sport, the AFL, the rival code, the AFLW is losing $50 million a year, and it's actually losing money on a year-to-year basis, which is not good. Now, the AFL is obviously a lot wealthier than the NRL in regards to media rights deal and the value of clubs and size of fan bases and amount of members, and it's run different on a different financial structure, but their women's game is hemorrhaging money. And fan TV viewership's dropping off. The quality level just isn't there, and it's starting to become a money pit for the AFL. This is one of their big projects. They've got, every team now has a women's side. Every club obviously has got a women's side, and it's just they've expanded too fast, too quick, and the quality's dropped off a cliff. The TV viewership is really dropped off a cliff. And I did a video comparing the viewership figures between the NRLW and the AFLW. The AFL was continuing, to basically prop up the women's game at this point. It started off really well. There was obviously initial interest. It was obviously they started off small with a limited number of clubs. And then as a response of COVID, they just went, right, we were going to expand quickly. And I think that's starting to become a problem for the AFL. Obviously, the Tasmania issue is an ongoing issue as well, when that 19th team is going to get a stadium to play in and when they're going to start play. That's something that needs to be looked at. And that's been dragging on now for some time, and it's been a bit of a mess and a bit of a headache for the AFL And I don't think all is rosy down in the state of Victoria at AFL headquarters in Melbourne. I think there are a lot of issues within the AFL, and while Aussie rules is a great sport, it's very entertaining. There are issues there, and I don't think the AFL are grappling with those issues very well. And now it's widely known that the AFLW is hemorrhaging money, and the talent just isn't there. They've expanded too fast, too quick. It's making the NRLW's expansion plan look like a masterstroke. I think the NRL are doing a lot better in growing women's rugby league than the AFL are doing in growing women's Aussie rules. It is of interesting note to look at, and yeah, it's one of them. There's no perfect solution to the AFLW problems, but there's just the quality isn't there. That from the top players down to the more squad players, there is a gulf in class and quality. When you've expanded very, very rapidly, you are going to dilute the product. In time, it will improve, but in the short and medium term, I think that the hemorrhaging of money is going to get worse because these players need to get paid. Fans aren't turning up, so attendance has started to drop off significantly, which is a big problem. And I think the AFL have mismanaged the growth of the women's game and the women's league quite significantly, which is not having a good impact and a good look, because a lot of people do criticise women's professional and semi-professional sport. It can be quite toxic on social media. Now, I'm a big proponent and a big supporter of women's pro sport and women's semi-pro sport, and women's sport in general. I think I'm a big proponent of it. I'm a big supporter of it, but it needs to be done in a structured and organic way where eventually it can become profitable, and it needs to be done slow and steady. You can't rush it. You can't, expand it rapidly and expect it to be on the, bring in the same kind of value and revenues as the men's. You can't treat it like that, but there needs to be a business argument for it. And that business argument just isn't there for the AFLW. And I think they're trying to, win an arms race with the NRL. And yeah, they've got more teams and more players, because an AFL squad does need to be bigger. An Aussie rule squad does need to be bigger than an NRL squad. But at the same time, I think they've built too much too quick. And the NRL, with the NRLW, being very slow, measured, and methodical in their growth strategy, and it has led to a much stronger, watchable, balanced product as a result. I look at the results, for example, this weekend. Most of the games were very, very close. There was only one real blowout score where one side was clearly being battered by the other. Most of the games were within a couple of points and went down to the final whistle. They were very, very closely contested matches, whereas in the AFLW, I mean, it's an absolute mess. And yeah, while they've got obviously some of the Gaelic football players from Ireland coming over, to play, to add a bit of quality, if the game is losing money, it's not going to do it. It's just not going to do it. And if you've got a declining TV audience and a declining fan base who pay to go to games, you're not going to get that star recognition. You're not going to get that player or players to have that brand recognition that you can then promote and sell and get fans to get behind when it comes to trying to promote the game, because there's less eyes on the product. There's only so long you can flog a dead horse before it just is just mangled, and they're basically trying to flog a product that's just not worth watching, and it's damaging the image of the AFL. But the AFL's got a lot of other issues that I think have cropped up in recent years that it's had some damaging scandals and some damaging headlines, which damage its brand and its image somewhat. And it gets harder and harder to try and justify some of the decisions that head office and Melbourne are making. And that's just from the outside looking in. I don't follow the AFL as religiously as I used to. I will admit that I'm not as a religious follower as I used to be. I haven't actually watched a game in a couple of years, to be fair, and I will admit that. It's been a while since I've watched an AFL game, but listening to some of the interviews, reading some of the articles, and a lot of fan feedback, there's a lot of issues with the AFL, and a lot of fans aren't actually happy with the direction the product's heading. And then you've got the whole Tasmania expansion debacle, which I think is damaging the AFL's image somewhat. It's dragging on down there, and that's going to cost a lot of money. And how will that expansion work? Will there be an expansion draft because the AFL has a draft system? How are they going to distribute the talent? How strong is that Tasmania team going to be? How competitive is that team going to be? Because we saw in the NRL how hard it was for the Dolphins, even though with all that financial backing they had and the junior base that the Dolphins under Redcliffe had, it was very, very hard to get players to sign there. And even when they got Super Coach Wayne Bennett, it was very, very hard for that expansion team to build a competitive roster. They end up being very competitive, and they're being very competitive this season. And I do think Tristan Wolfe is doing quite well after a slow start to his head coaching tenure there. Their attack is mesmerising. The injuries and the depth issues are starting to be exposed a little bit, but they play an exciting brand. But it took them a while to start getting big name players to want to sign there and extend there. Obviously, the reports are Herbie Farnsworth's going to sign that big contract, making one of the highest paid players in the NRL. But it's taken them 3-4 seasons to get to that point, which raises the concern about how strong is the Perth team going to be? What players are going to want to sign in Western Australia and move from Sydney or Brisbane or the east coast of Australia or even New Zealand and go to the other side of the continent to go to that expansion team? And there's a reason why they've got Mal Meninga as now the former Kangaroos head coach to be the first head coach for the team. Bearing in mind his record at Canberra was average. He wasn't the worst coach Canberra have had, but it was an average record that he had. I think he had a winning record at Canberra in regards to win percentage, but it wasn't outstanding. He hasn't coached at club level for 2 decades. So it makes you wonder what strength of squad they're going to be able to assemble with how NRL contracts work and who's going to be available in the next 12 to 18 months to sign for Perth, because they've got a cut-off point. They've got to get X amount of players signed by November 1st next year. And then there will still be other players available after that. But they've got, 18 months to basically build a team from scratch. And with the way that, Western Australia, they're more of an AFL state and A-League state in regards to their sports fandom. The relationship with the media has been a bit rocky to start, which is not good when you're trying to grow, get fans interested. There are rugby league fans out there, and they do have a decent state league with registered players. And there is a junior base out there, there's that potential for growth. But when you've already started to have a rocky relationship with the local media out there, the local newspapers, radio and TV, that's difficult. That is a difficult one. So winning of hearts and minds, we should see what happens there and how that transpires, if we're being honest, and how that works out. Then you've got the PNG expansion, and there's a lot of pitfalls there, and there's a lot of unknowns, and who's going to coach up there, and what we end up getting as a product. Will they be ready in 2028? And then obviously you're going to have an odd-numbered league again with 19 teams, and you've got to get a 20th team in at some point. And I would go for South Island of New Zealand or another team in New Zealand, be it Wellington, for example, Christchurch, Hamilton. Put another team in New Zealand, fans will turn up and they will be well supported. It's then the concern about the corporate side, the sponsorship, the media relationship you have with local and national media in New Zealand, because you have a much smaller media base, a much smaller corporate base, and a much smaller population to deal with. Yes, fans will turn up. They will sell tickets. They will sell merchandise. But it's that corporate side, and it's getting that financial backing. And even the Warriors have problems with financial backing for many, many years. So it's a difficult one. And then you come over to North America, and you're looking at the major leagues over in North America and the potential of expansion and where do they expand. And of course, there's a big discussion surrounding the NHL and Major League Baseball right now about potential future expansion. The NHL, I think, is further down the track with the next batch of expansion than any other major league. While the NHL is saying it's not going to happen right now, we're not in expansion mode, we're not planning to expand. The fact that they've extended the CBA until 2030, I think, is a big hint that there's going to be expansion. If not within the next 5 years, they're going to stop the process within the next 5 years. I can't see the NHLPA wanting a lockout or a player strike because they're going to get more members with expansion. They will get more members, but it's going to be the cost. What are the expansion fees going to be? What locations are they going to look at? We know in the US and Canada, there are interested parties in a lot of locations. We know Atlanta is definitely top of the list. We know Phoenix has a 5-year first refusal. We know Houston is exceptionally interested, and we know some lesser cities, lesser metros, such as Omaha, Nebraska, and New Orleans in Louisiana, have declared interest in discussions surrounding further expansion of the NHL. Indianapolis is one of the cities that the NHL would like to go to. They might find that a bit harder to crack with the Pacers and the Colts getting, being well established, and of course, being the motorsport capital pretty much of the Midwest, with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and motorsport being a big part of the sporting fan base in Indiana. But they want to go to Indianapolis. That is on their priority list of cities and locations that the NHL is considering going to. They've basically printed out their list of preferred locations. And NHL fans will say we should have a team in Quebec. We need another team in Quebec. We need a team in Hamilton. And don't get me wrong, Quebec City and that arena would sell out. Every game would be a sellout. But again, it's the corporate, and it will cost more in expansion fees because the Canadian dollar against the US, and it's been that way for a long time, is weaker. So what would be like $1 in the US is like $1.35, and because the salaries paid in US dollars, it is more expensive to run a Canadian team. It is more expensive to run a Canadian team in the NHL, or in fact any major league. Now, the fact that Toronto, apart from the NFL, has a team in every major league in the US, in North America, it's Toronto. Vancouver and Montreal have MLS teams. Other than that, the NBA, Major League Baseball, they got teams in Toronto. It's the NFL just does not have a team north of the border, and nor would they. I think that would kill the CFL personally, and I don't think it would work unless you're playing them inside an indoor stadium, just because of how cold Canada gets, and the winters they get are far more brutal than in south of the border for the most part. But you start to get an idea of the fact that the NHL is further down that rabbit hole of expansion. Major League Baseball, though, does have expansion potentially on the horizon, but with Major League Baseball, there's more uncertainty. We're basically going to have a lockout in the next 18 months. I can guarantee that. It's going to be a repeat of the last lockout. I think whether we actually lose games rather than have a just delayed start to the season is watch this space. But I do think the MLB Players Association and the league do not have a good working relationship. I think that is pretty much well established from the build up to the last lockout. I think the league's at a crossroads. It's the only major league without a salary cap. I think that's something that needs to be discussed. There is no salary cap in Major League Baseball at all. And that surprises me to this day, that all the other major leagues have got salary caps in place of various styles of salary cap, be it a hard cap or a soft cap or a flexible cap. And Major League Baseball just has this sort of luxury tax system, which still does not even out and balance out the league's competitiveness. There are some teams that are just not spending money at all on player contracts, and other teams are spending ridiculous amounts, almost just obscene amounts of money on single player contracts. Like some of the players, like Otani's contract is worth more than the payroll of the Athletics, for example. There are some owners who've got money to spend, and other owners don't want to spend money because they don't have any. And then you've got to look at the potential of Orlando as a future expansion location, and how Major League Baseball feels about having another team in Florida, considering the issues with Tampa and the Rays and their stadium issues. And you look at the Athletics and what's going to happen with Vegas and how it's not really working as a temporary stop off in Sacramento, and some of the issues surrounding those two teams in Major League Baseball. And then you've got the Chicago White Sox and their ongoing, are they going to be able to build a new stadium, and will they stay in Chicago? If they move, that'll be ridiculous because they're one of the oldest teams in Major League Baseball. You've got Kansas City and the ongoing issues with their facilities. So that there's a lot going on with Major League Baseball. And I think Rob Manfred is a commissioner who's under a lot of pressure to solve some of these problems. And he's the public face of the league. And I don't think he's a very, very popular administrator that the sport is. I think he's the least popular commissioner I think Major League Baseball's ever had, and Major League Baseball's had a lot of scandals over the years. A lot of scandals has been had. The steroid scandal, sign stealing scandal. There's been a lot of other scandals that's involved Major League Baseball over the years. Now there's concerns about spot fixes in games and potential match fixing in regards to the surge and the rise of sports betting in the US and Canada. That started to rear its ugly head. And, I think while there are safeguards and checks and balances in place, I think the optics look quite bad. And, the biggest and most famous sports betting scandal in American history is the Chicago White Sox of 1919, the Black Sox scandal. And so that's something that does need to be thought about. And yeah, there are the checks and balances in place, but I think the optics look quite bad. I think I don't think the major leagues and the sporting fraternity in North America is fully prepared for the negatives of sports betting and legalized sports betting, and then the illegal side. I just don't think when that first real major scandal breaks, not involving individual players, but involving whole teams and spot fixes or match fixes and alleged fixing and corruption in that sense, I think that's something that's going to happen. And when it does happen, I think the fallout is going to be absolutely earth-shattering, and I think it is going to involve some high-profile teams and high-profile players when it does happen. We've already seen individual players get bans and warnings for their conduct. We've seen it, I think, in all the major leagues at this point, that players have breached betting guidelines and the rules surrounding it, whether intentionally or otherwise. There was a journeyman NBA player who's got a lifetime ban. And I just don't think North America is fully prepared for what we've seen in Europe and Asia over many, many years now in regards to sports corruption, in regards to betting. And I just think they're woefully underprepared for it. I think it's a ticking time bomb. And bearing in mind, legalized sports gambling outside of the casinos, for example, in Vegas, and Nevada in general, where gambling laws are much more relaxed, has only been a thing for a few years now. I just don't think, the governing bodies and the leagues are fully prepared. I think they've got their guidelines in place, and and stuff like that. I just don't think that they just fully realise just what they're going to get in for. And there's a journalist who's got a YouTube channel called Brody Brazil that I watch quite regularly. I do watch him quite regularly. And every time we're talking about a potential betting scandal or betting breaches or an individual player getting in a bit of hot water, I know there's a Major League Baseball pitcher who's sort of on gardening leave at the moment. We saw Shohei Ohtani's interpreter, steal money off him and place a lot of bets. So we've seen a few incidents in the last, was it Shane Pinto in the NHL got a 41 game ban, which is half a season, a year or two ago for the Ottawa Senators. So we've seen a few incidents in the last couple of years involving individual players. But I just don't think that when it does hit the fan, I think there needs to be a long, hard conversation that the major leagues in North America have. There needs to be a long, hard conversation, and I'm not sure they're ready for it. I'm not sure that they are fully equipped to deal with the aftermath and the fallout, because what makes sport enjoyable is the uncertainty of the outcome, and we believe that everyone's good and everyone's playing to the best of their ability, and they're in it to win it for themselves, and they're playing to the best of their ability. But when you've got potentially players deliberately not playing well because of a fix, when you lose that integrity, TV viewership and attendance will plummet. Fans will start staying away. We've seen it in other leagues where we've had these corruption scandals, be it owners are dodgy or players or club officials or whatever it may be. We've seen damaging scandals in European football, in Asian sports, in cricket. We've seen it, and it has had an impact on fan perception of, this is not doping, which has damaged a lot of sports integrity. This is like, are these players, have they got any personal integrity? Are they fixing this game? Are they spot fixing a certain moment in the game where this player has to get booked, or this player has to get a sin bin, or this player has to, do a certain action at a certain point? Is this referee got integrity? We've seen it with the NBA betting scandal with Donaghy, the referee, back in 2008. So we know that there's an undercurrent there, and I do feel that the potential consequences, I just don't think the major leagues in North America are fully prepared for the outcomes. I don't think they'll like what's going to happen. And I do think it will send shockwaves through the North American fan base when a high-profile player or a high-profile team is embroiled in a betting scandal or some form of sports corruption. I just think, while we've seen cheating to win with sign stealing in Major League Baseball and doping with athletes and players, and that did a lot of damage to Major League Baseball, the steroid scandal and the sign stealing did a lot of reputational damage to various teams, players' image, the league, and I think that's one sport that has had a lot of scandal. But look what happened with pro cycling with doping. I still think even now, all these years later, after the Lance Armstrong revelations and the Festina scandal of '98 in the Tour de France, I still think even now, 2.5 decades later, I think the reputation of pro cycling is still trying to rebuild itself. I think a lot of fans are like, is that guy clean? And when we do have cyclists who still regularly fail doping tests, there are still a lot of cyclists who fail the dope tests. Even now, we're going, it's another stain on the sport. And a lot of fans turned against the sport of pro cycling. And I love my pro cycling, not going to lie. I love the Tour de France, love the Giro, love the Vuelta, love the other stage races as well, the more regional races, the one-day classics. If I can watch them, I do. Massive fan. But what happened in the 90s and the 2000s into the 2010s did so much to damage the image of the sport. A lot of fans sort of knew it was going on but didn't want to accept it. But when it became all public, that perception of these guys are just great athletes was gone. When whole teams were being systematically doped, and the riders were like, yeah, I'll do it. When there was that much cheating and corruption within the sport, the integrity was gone, and it's still trying to rebuild that integrity and trust with its fans. Sponsors got a bit wary of getting involved, and that has a financial impact. High-profile riders, ultimately, like Marco Pantini, for example, the Pirate. dead. And steroids and drug addiction had obviously a massive part to play with what happened to him. And he died very young. And, that definitely damaged the sport. Track and field. Again, what came out in the 90s and the 2000s in track and field, like athletics, when some of the biggest, most high-profile athletes, like Marion Jones, for example, and in the entire field of the 1988 100 meters final, apart from the Brazilian guy who finished last, all subsequently were banned for doping. The dirtiest final in history. The Seoul Olympics is known as the dirtiest Olympic Games in history for doping, which is ridiculous, really. The 1988 100 meters final, only one of the runners had a clean career, and that was the Brazilian guy who finished ninth. The guy who finished last. How do you retrospectively award the medals then? How? The Ben Johnson 88 Seoul Olympics, smashed the integrity of track and field. And then, oh shit. Oh, I've just had a power cut. That's fucking great. That's amazing. Hang on 1 second. There we go. Power's back on. Just had a little power outage there. No, I mean, I think we do need to have a think about the integrity of sport. I mean, we've seen doping scandals. We've seen corruption in regards to sports owners, bribery. But I still think, something is going to happen in regards to the major leagues in North America. And what could happen could have massive consequences, I think, in the long term. I just don't think they are fully prepared for the outcomes. I just absolutely think that they're not fully prepared, and the outcomes could be quite severe. And when a sport loses its fans' trust, and I do. I'm plodding along. But as I was saying, when a sport loses its fans' trust and the integrity is broken for whatever reason, it's very, very hard to rebuild it. Very, very hard. Just going to check the sports headlines here in the UK, and then I'll have a little look at some other stuff. Let's have a quick look. Oh dear, right. So this is something I wasn't expecting from the Women's Euros. So England have called in the police over racist abuse aimed at Jess Carter. On Sunday, so today, the Lionesses said they would stop the anti-racism gesture of taking the before matches. It was clear women football needs to find another way to tackle racism. She's added she'll take a step back from social media. The FA has said it was working with police to ensure those responsible for this hate crime brought to justice. From the start of the tournament, Jess Carter has experienced a lot of racial abuse. And she hasn't had a good tournament, as in on the field. But I still think that in itself is very surprising, that this has reared its ugly head at the Women's Euros. But apparently it's not a new thing. Wow. Even during the 2023 Women's World Cup, there was similar abuse aimed at players. It was a player-led decision to raise the matter with the FA today. but I'm actually surprised that that's a thing in the women's game. I really am. I'm very, very surprised with that. Let's see what other sports news we have. Let's have a look. But that is very, very worrying that that's become a thing. Scheifler in the Open as a little slip up. Wellens cruises to a stage 15 win in the Tour de France. Obviously, the Lions beat Australia yesterday. Usyk knocked out Dubois in that rematch. He's a beast in the boxing ring. So there's not much happening in the world of sport, but it is very concerning that obviously players at the women's Euros have been targeted with racist abuse. That is just it sums up where we are at as a society at the moment, which for me not good enough. And the fact that it was a player-led decision to go to the FA and raise the concern is quite troubling. But yeah, I mean, look, I think we need to start as calling this stuff out as fans. The fact that unfortunately social media is a bit of sewer of humanity, in my personal opinion. I think the social media companies need to do more. These it's not good enough. Again, I don't really talk about my job on here. I keep telling you this. My day job is my day job. When I'm not at work, I'm at home. I leave that as that's a work thing. Talking about balancing this out, obviously, I would love to do this full time. I want to devote more energy to the channel, and but like, yeah, I try and I do discuss my job on the channel, obviously, like how it impacts upload schedule and how it impacts channel growth and devoting time. At the end of the day, I try and keep that work-life balance, and as I do this as a hobby, obviously, while I'm earning some money, obviously off the phone. Look, that management. So I'm going to say with that, it's a management thing. There's a lot, as I say, I try and keep that work-life balance there and try and separate the two. I mean, look, I have discussed what I do as a job, obviously, on the channel, and obviously newer viewers will come along and they won't necessarily know that I don't do this full time and that I do have a day job. And, the fact that I've been doing this since 2017, I've been doing it, what, 8 years I've been doing YouTube now. I've been doing sports content for about just under 8 years. But yeah, no. Talking about and having that discussion about how as there's a lot of YouTubers who do have day jobs, and trying to find that right balance and try and have a healthy balance is difficult. The last couple of weeks, obviously, with the weather, how it's been, and I have discussed this, the weather has been brutal. The weather, I think, what's the weather going to do tomorrow? This is something that, obviously, with lots of outdoor sporting events like cricket, for example, the weather's going to have a massive part to play in it, whether some sports can actually take place. The weather tomorrow is not looking great. There's some thunderstorms floating about, I think. Yeah, the weather tomorrow is not looking great at times. Tuesday, the weather's not looking great. And as the week goes on, it gets warm again. But when I started the channel, I was in between jobs at the time, and then I got back into work, and then the channel was more of an evening thing because I had an office job, and then I worked on a farm, and so that was a day job, and working outside in all weathers, and then again coming home, and obviously since 2019, I've worked at in the current industry I'm in, and I've worked for 3 different companies, for 3 different local authorities. Um, of course, the work hours work quite well. They do, but at the same time, obviously being a very physically demanding, energy sapping job, and when the weather is like how it's been, with it being really hot, really humid, it's really exhausting sometimes. And then you get home and you're flat out, exhausted, worn out. Um, you know, it does have an impact. And I have discussed like the work-life balance and trying to get a better balance, and trying to have like a more regimented, upload schedule, and trying to get better structure around the channel, and trying to plan things a bit better, and looking at like the channel growth strategy a little bit, and trying to find a better balance, as time has gone on. That's something that I still need to get better at. I will admit that I do need to find a better work life balance, and balancing the day job with what we're doing here. But in regards to the day job, I don't really discuss the company I work for or anything like that. I've got to be very careful. I can't obviously criticize the company I work for, or the management or work colleagues, because that can get me sacked. And that has happened to other YouTubers where they have their YouTube, which does make them money and whatever. And I've seen it with other people as well, where they've got other forms of social media and other forms of income as content creators, and then they either don't declare it to their employer, or they are critical of their employer on their social media platform, and they get sacked. And so that's another reason why, because I try and obviously be as friendly to the public as possible and all that, and yeah, it is nice when you do meet a subscriber as well. That is kind of fun. I've actually bumped into some subscribers before, and I've only got 1,520 subscribers. But at the same time, when you do have a social media presence, and there'll be people who don't agree with what you say, and it's again, this is where you try and get that work-life balance, and get things right. And I think it's hard. There are those with much bigger channels, with much bigger followings, with more viewers, more subscribers, different content, whatever they're making. It doesn't matter if it's on YouTube or another platform like TikTok or Instagram or Twitch, or other platforms. And they could be out and about. Yeah, oh god, you found the other channel. I haven't posted on the other channel in a very long time. And I have neglected it. And I've got some book reviews to do. I've got some film reviews to do. I've got some other topics to discuss, some history topics to do some content on. I've got some ideas for my week off work. I might do some content for the other channel, but it has been a long time since I posted anything on the other. I think it's been about a year. How long am I live for? I don't have a clue. I've still got to do some housework. I've got to do my dinner yet. I just thought because obviously it's a Sunday, and I haven't done one for a while. I thought I would do do a live stream. I don't know. I don't know. It depends how many more people want to watch and ask questions and engage. And it all depends. I don't know. I could be 5 minutes. I could be 5 hours. I honestly don't know yet. I do obviously have to be up for work in the morning. I've got to sort some housework out. I've got to sort my dinner out. And the weather's not going to be great tomorrow morning. I mean, apparently it's going to be absolutely hammering down tomorrow for a bit, and so it's going to be one of them days where the weather isn't great. And you know that's that's just is what it is. And yeah, I don't know who we're working with tomorrow, and there's work is work. I'm looking forward to my week off, to be honest. I am looking forward to my week off, and I've got some ideas for the channel and some video ideas, and looking at some more sports history and you know. End of the month. I don't know what I'm doing yet. I might actually go visit some friends and family and just disappear for a week. I don't know what I'm doing yet. I've got a lot to do, and I've got to try and fit a lot of things into 7 days, and that includes obviously channel stuff because I need to keep the channel going, but I also need to do a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things I need to do. I've got family to see. I've got friends I need to catch up with. And I've got to help some friends out with some stuff. I've got to get some stuff for the flat, and I also just need a bit of R&R. I need a little bit of rest and relaxation and a bit of a factory reset. This summer the weather has been absolutely exhausting. It's been so draining. The working in this heat and just even in the flat, like when I'm doing a YouTube video or a live stream, it gets really warm, in the flat. The humidity is just it's draining. And then when it's so hot and so humid and it builds up and it doesn't drop off at night, sleep is impossible. I mean, it isn't pleasant. The weather has not been pleasant. And obviously with the day job and when you work outside and when you're doing a very physical job, which is very physically demanding. It's a simple job, but it's very physically demanding. That leads to wear and tear. I mean, I'm working with a bit of a buggered knee. I think it's a good way to look at it. I've got an ongoing shoulder complaint. I've got a knee issue. So the body, when oh god, yeah, the weather's exhausting. This is where I have a lot of sympathy for professional athletes. When I've been watching the women's Euros, I mean, the early round of group stage matches, they were having water breaks because it hit that temperature threshold of being above 30 degrees pitch side. Even at 9 p.m. at night in Switzerland, even in the late kickoffs, the temperatures were so high and the humidity was so high, it reached that temperature and humidity threshold for the water breaks. We've seen it in the FIFA Club World Cup where game weather delays impacted games, and we've seen it in the cricket in the county championship, for example. I've been following the county championship and the big T20 blast and the one-day games in the county championship. We're seeing it obviously in cricket. We've seen it in the women's Euros and the FIFA Club World Cup. I think Wimbledon. I think some players did struggle at Wimbledon at times. And I have a lot of respect for those athletes. Rugby league, the Super League. I mean, they're playing in the height of summer, which was traditionally a winter sport, and obviously the governing bodies decided to make it a summer sport. And whether you agree or disagree on that, fans are going to have their opinions on whether it's a good idea for the sport to remain as a summer sport or should it revert back to a winter sport. Would that actually help rugby league in this country? Because when the schools play it, they play in winter, and that's part of that future development and junior pathways. I've got a lot of respect for the athletes, and I don't know what the weather's going to be like in Switzerland next week in regards to temperatures, but we've already got the pre-season games for football in Europe. Right? We've already got UEFA qualifying rounds for the Conference League, Europa League, and Champions League being played. So some teams are not really having a pre-season; they're already in competitive matches for the 2025-2026 season, and so then they haven't really had a break. This is what I mean. I think when we sit down and we discuss the player welfare argument, and then this is the argument I think Jurgen Klopp was having with the Club World Cup at the beginning of the month, when he did raise the concern that this tournament's too big, it's unnecessary, it's putting a lot of strain on the players, and player welfare is being impacted. Top of Monday morning from Auckland. How about Lekia and the Wales that ending? I actually haven't watched the game. I've talked about the scoreline, and I've talked about with the fact that Metcalf's out injured, and some of the other players that are out injured. The fact that the Warriors are still a top four side, and the fact they won a game like that last year they would have lost, is a testament to how Webster is coaching them, and how the team are playing, and how they've bought in, and how the fan base has bought in, and I like what the Warriors are doing, and the culture they've built down there over the last 4 or 5 years, and this is what I do think. I do honestly mean this. I do think there should be a second team in New Zealand. I think that 20th team, when it does get announced, and how the process works for it, I do think New Zealand deserves a second team. Whether that's on the North Island or South Island, a team in Wellington, a team in Hamilton, a team in Christchurch, wherever they decide to place it, New Zealand definitely deserves that second team, that 20th team. I think what the Warriors have done has really ignited sports fans across New Zealand to buy into rugby league. And I some of the young players they're unearthing down there, down where you are, is they're just fantastic. I'm not going to lie, some of those young Kiwi boys and Pacific Islanders, who live in New Zealand, who are playing the game and coming through the system, it's fantastic. I really do think that. I do mean that. I absolutely mean that. I honestly mean that. I'm going to try. I just had to rest my back and my knee for a bit. Sitting like this with my left knee is really uncomfortable. It's very, very hard to get my knee comfortable. I'm working with a bit of a sore MCL and PCL at the moment, and it's a bit brutal. But no, I think, and of course with my shoulder, it gets painful, like sitting like this without back support. So sometimes I have to prop. Oh, I live in a studio apartment, so my bedroom is also my living room. So, and my bed is really comfortable. I would love to have sat on the sofa over there, but I would have to move a lot of stuff and rearrange the apartment and figure out a way to light the apartment better, and get the laptop over there, and I'm not sure that sofa's got the best back support, to be honest, because the way it's more of a recliner, to be honest. But maybe I decide to use. Well, you would call me a garbage man, garbologist, bin man, dustman, working on the bins, mate. I work in the residential waste disposal, and of course, I don't know what the weather's like in New Zealand right now, but the weather here has been sweltering hot. We've not had, apart from obviously the next few days, we had a lot of rain today. We had some rain overnight. We've had a few odd little bits of drizzle, but the best part of like 3 months, it hasn't rained. We're technically in drought, even though it's pissed down with rain all day. I went to the shops earlier to buy some tobacco and some drinks. Get the sugar-free ones; they taste better. And I got absolutely drenched in a sudden downpour. Got the shop, bought my tobacco and a couple of drinks. Walking back home, another pop-up one. Then the sun came out, and then I got back in the flat, and then within half hour, the washing machine finished. So I'm getting the washing out, go outside for a cigarette, and it just tipped down again. And I thought, that's it. I'm going inside, and I'm going to do a live stream now. I'm not waiting any longer. I was going to wait another hour or so. But yeah, it's winter down. I know there's been a lot of rain in New Zealand and the east coast of Australia in the last couple of months. There's been flooding. I completely understand that the weather's been a bit hectic, which is a good word, hectic, down in the Antipodes where you're at. But yeah, no, I'll have to at some point watch on the NRL website the NRL. No. I just prefer Monster. They're not my sponsor, but I wish they were. Could use a sponsorship. But no, I just like some of the new flavors they've got out. It's my favorite energy drink. I try and actually avoid. I'm not sponsored by anyone. If Monster want to hit me up, that'd be kind of cool. If Lucozade, another energy drink, sports drink, want to hit me up, that'd be lovely. But I've had no approaches from anyone for a sponsorship. It'd be kind of nice. But no, I just like some of the flavors that Monster have. I used to prefer Relentless, but then I was never a massive fan of energy drinks until the Rossi Monster came out about a decade or so ago, 12 years ago. It's kind of hard to find, although I nearly picked up a couple of cans today, but I thought I would stick with what flavour I got. The Ultra Strawberry Dreams. This stuff tastes like a McDonald's strawberry milkshake. This stuff is fantastic. It's the sugar-free version as well, and it's quite nice. It's quite nice. But no, if Monster want to hit me up, it'd be nice. But no, I've got no sponsors. I mean, at the moment, the only money we're getting is from fans basically leaving super chats, super thanks, and memberships. That's all the revenue we're getting at the moment. So at the moment, I'm not getting any ad revenue at the moment. So if you want to become a member, obviously the membership tab is available, and you can do that. If you want to leave a super chat or a super thanks, you can do that. And that is the only revenue we're making at the moment. We've got no sponsorships. We haven't hit the view hour threshold to get ad revenue. So yeah, if Monster do want to become a sponsor, they're more than welcome to. But no one's emailed me saying, "Hey, we've seen you drinking our product. We're happy to sponsor." No, as I say, had no sponsorships yet. No offers of sponsorships yet. I've got to look into that at some point. And is it worthwhile? Because then you have to, have the product and place the product and all that. And I'm not too comfortable with that because I think that's an unnatural thing. I just enjoy their product. There are those who are not massive fan of the soft drinks and the energy drinks and stuff like that. And I understand the argument behind it on a health standpoint. High caffeinated drinks aren't good for young people. But I survive off caffeine and nicotine. Otherwise, I would probably be serving some prison time. I tell you, because life's too stressful. But no, as I say, talking about the Warriors and talking about obviously the talent pool, I do think New Zealand has enough talent. Obviously, there's talk of this Saudi-backed R360 rugby competition that the Saudis with the Public Investment Fund want to set up. And is that a threat to rugby union and rugby league and the NRL especially and Super Rugby and all that? As we've seen with every other Saudi idea, it won't. Anyone who goes is going there as a mercenary player for money. They're not going for the joy of the game, whatever sport they play. And their reputation just goes down the toilet because then fans will go, well, you're greedy. You went for the money. Because they're not going to sell out stadiums, I can tell you that. Look at the Saudi Pro League with Ronaldo. He's playing in front of about 12 blokes and a goat. And I mean that with a bit of tongue-in-cheek. It's basically like pub football here, where you've got, a pub team playing in front of like just their mates couple of the pub regulars, and a dog. That's when you've got these massive 30, 40,000 seater stadiums with like 2, 3, 4,000 fans in. It's kind of embarrassing, sort of like the FIFA Club World Cup. So this Saudi-backed R360 rugby kind of competition that the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia want to get up and running. There are some high-profile players like Kalen Ponga and Tuivasa Sheck who've sort of been linked with it, and there's been some Aussie players as well, and some European players sort of rumoured to be unhappy with their current contracts, and they've sort of been, linked with it. But, I look at the Saudi Pro League. We saw the same kind of idea with the Chinese Super League with football, and that became a match-fixed farce. And, players went there and... well, look, I mean, he's a brilliant player. I don't know what his best position is. I mean, some people say he should be a fullback. Other people say he should play in the centres. Other people say he should play on the wing. How you would fit him into the Kiwi Test side, and obviously with the Warriors, that's a coaching decision. That is a coaching decision for Andrew Webster and his coaching team to make, and of course is it Stacey Jones is the Test coach for New Zealand? That's a decision for the national coaching setup and his club coaching setup in regards to where he plays, But then you've got this rumor of him being lured away by big money. Look, obviously the NRL is the top rugby league competition, and they pay decent wages. But I'll say this in regards to the pro sports. Rugby union, rugby league, and I will say professional ice hockey, 3 of the most brutal contact team sports you can play, in my opinion, chronically underpaid. Now, there's reasons for that. You need more players in squads. So, obviously, with squad sizes and salary caps, that becomes a bit difficult, obviously, to get mega money for every player. Ice hockey is exceptionally expensive to play as a sport, with all the equipment costs associated with that. So the junior development, that is a very expensive sport for kids to play. Parents have to fork out a lot of money for the equipment, the skates, the lessons, the coaching. And then when you reach that elite level, when I say elite level, we're not just talking the NHL with the ice hockey or the NRL. When you reach that elite level, and your parents have had to sacrifice a lot, and in some cases, kids have had to, as young teenagers, had to go and live with billet families, well away from home and their friends and what they're used to, they struggle. So there's that. But the rumours linking like Tuivasa Sheck and all that to this, and Kalen Ponga and some other union and league players to this competition, they are there. While he does deserve to get a good payday, is that the right move for him to make, or any of these players to make? Because if it flops, which I think it will do as a competition, even with all the Saudi public investment money, which is a bottomless pit of cash, that image, that PR, that public image that these guys want to have, because they want to get sponsors to sponsor them, they want to do the commercials, they want to get their third-party arrangements. When that sort of goes wrong and it damages their reputation, that's a difficult one, isn't it? It is a difficult one. 2 weeks to go until the new season, and Chelsea have just finished the Club World Cup. Man City obviously got to the knockout stages. That is no off-season and pre-season for these guys. There is no way for them to be rested and prepared for the new season. I'm not being funny. We're already seeing, in the middle of July, pre-season friendlies. I mean, yesterday Reading were playing Spurs, so my local club were playing Spurs. For me, that is not enough. That is not enough rest and recuperation for these players. And as I said last year, watching the Euros, this time last year, some of the games were at walking pace. That first week of the group stages was fantastic football. Fantastic. And then it was played at a walking pace and the quality dropped off a cliff. The players looked out on their feet. It will be interesting to see how Chelsea do, considering that some of their top profile players were actually playing like Palmer and Cucurella, for example, were playing, obviously, in the tournament and playing big minutes. And so while Cucurella and Palmer are young, they are under the age of 25, and so they've got youth on their side. That's no rest and recuperation. That's no off season. They're going straight from a major tournament straight into pre-season. There is no off season there. So I do. Oh God! What will the FIFA World Cup look like, and what it will be like? We'll look at the weather delays we had, and look at the crowds. I have concerns. I've done a video raising my concerns. I think FIFA should have kept the Confederations Cup. That would have been a better test tournament to have, because it's international teams rather than clubs teams playing, and then you might obviously get that, more fans going, because the Confederations Cup was a brilliant tournament. I'm not going to lie, it was a brilliant tournament format back in the day. I miss it. I think FIFA made a massive error when they got rid of that tournament format. I think the same could be said of the Cup Winners' Cup in European club football. Look, I'm going to try my best to watch as many games as possible, but I know I don't really talk a lot about my job, but working as a subcontractor for my local authority, the contract's changing hands next year. And guess what? When the World Cup starts, that's the month when the new contract starts with the new employer. So I'm very, very tempted in like my last couple of weeks of working with my current employer, just to book a load of time off, and then the new employer has to honour it. So that, I think my bosses might be like, yeah, you can take time off for that, and that will be the ultimate fu to the new employer. Because I want to watch as many games as possible, and admittedly, though, if they are going to persist with having these kickoff times at 5, 8, 10, and 10 p.m., for example, at 5 or 7 or 5 p.m. or 7 p.m. and like 11 p.m. more for the European audience, so they're going to be earlier kickoff times in the day for the US fans. If FIFA are going to persist with that, then I won't have to book any time off work, because I'll be working in the day and at home in the evening, and I can watch. I can watch. I'm going to try and watch as many games as possible. It's going to be difficult. I won't be able to watch every game. There is no way I'm watching 104 games or bits of 104 games, because obviously the last stage of the group stage, each group, the games have to kick off at the same time. You have to have, those kind of kickoffs. There is no way I'm watching all or part of 104 games in, 6-7 weeks. There is no way that is humanly feasible, especially with still having a day job. Now, if I was to do this full time, then yeah, I could devote obviously as much time as possible to watching as many games as possible. The only even the Rugby World Cup, I didn't watch every game. I missed I think 4 games in total. The Rugby League World Cup, which we hosted a few years ago in 2022, the delayed, I watched every game of that and all the women's games as well. That actually, even then, even though it was evening kickoffs and on the weekends, they got the weekend games right with daytime kickoffs, but not in the week. Even watching that, that was difficult, because I've got a day job. I didn't book any time off for the Rugby League World Cup or the Rugby Union World Cup that we had in, I think, was it 2023? Yeah, it was, in France. I missed like 4 games of that. While I didn't book any time off work to do that, and I was kind of lucky with the kickoff times being more suited for afternoons and evenings, that was difficult. I don't have Sky, and so therefore, no, and I'm not paying for it, because if I was a Sky customer, it's an extra 22 quid a month for 3 games. It's just not happening. I've looked at their terms and conditions. Anyone who signs up for that is going to shaft themselves, so they get stuck in a fixed 24-month contract. It's just not worth it. And you're already paying enough. They got the win. That's important. With some of the warm-up games, as in the non-test matches against the club sides from Super Rugby, there were some question marks over some of the performances of some of the players. It wasn't a perfect performance against Australia. That defeat to Argentina as a warm-up test for the Lions tour as well raised some eyebrows. But Argentina, I think, are a better side than Australia. I think Argentina deserve a Lions tour personally. Does it still have the same significance? Well, the fact that a fair chunk of the British and Irish Lions are even British or Irish tells you something. There's a lot of South Africans, a lot of Kiwis, a lot of Aussies in the Lions squad by birth. And this is where we have to look at how people qualify for Test status and how we are apart from the Kiwis, the Aussies, and the South Africans, who've obviously might have a parent or a grandparent kind of from back in the day. When they come here and they just get their residency after being here for X amount of years, it sort of does make a mockery of the youth development system and getting, are these foreign nationals who've got residency, who've played youth level. I mean, there are some of the players who played youth level for South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Samoa, Tonga, Fiji. This is in past Lions tours as well. And this is even when it comes to standard Test nations, tier ones and tier twos. Italy had this problem where a lot of the Italian players were Argentinians because of parentage. Now that one is a difficult grey area, but when you've got, I remember there was it Scott Spedding who played for, and Willemse who currently plays for France, both South African born, have got no parentage or grandparentage from France, qualified via residency. That's something that World Rugby needs to look at, and it's the same thing with the IRL and International Rugby League as well. We've seen this discussion in association football at times. Well, with the Aussies, well, look, some of their best young players have switched codes to league. That is I've had this discussion about the state of rugby union in Australia and where it's at and how look, Suoliti, for example, is a league player. Let's be honest. He's been developed by league. He's obviously played a handful of seasons for the Roosters. Because of the salary cap in the NRL, Rugby Australia saw an opportunity to get him out of his Roosters contract, because the Roosters were in salary cap hell. There was not, there's been a lot of question marks over the Roosters sombrero and Uncle Nick and all that. And if you follow the NRL like I do, you will know that the salary cap there are loopholes all over the place. And so Rugby Australia saw an opportunity to get him for the 2027 World Cup. They need a face for the 2027 World Cup. They've lost Mark Nwangani-Tuase to the Roosters. So that star player they had, one of the star players they had, went to the Roosters, so they grabbed one from the Roosters, and it was sort of a swap kind of thing. Now, Mark Nwangani-Tuase originally played league as a youth player, and then he switched to Union when he was about 14. Suoliti, Mark Nwangani-Tuase, who actually was one of the better players at that disastrous World Cup that Australia played in a couple of years ago. He's been lost to league. There's a few others. There's a young lad there's an older player who's just gone to the St George Illawarra Dragons, who was part of the Sevens program at the Olympics. He's played at a couple of Olympics. He's gone over to league. The women's game, there's a whole host of players that have left Union and gone over to league in the NRLW. A whole host of them. So rugby union, not only in Australia but also in New Zealand, is in deep trouble. The Kiwi Ferns have lost a lot of players, and is it the Gillaroos? No, the Gillaroos is rugby league, isn't it? What are the female Aussie nickname for because you've got the Wallabies, the men's team. Is it the Gillaroos? Is it the Gillaroos? I can't remember now. I know it's the Matildas for the football team. I'm trying to think what the nickname is for the women's rugby union team in Australia, but a load of them from the Sevens program and the 15-a-side game have gone over to league. because they get paid more. Even as semi-pros, they get paid more for their appearance fees. Some of the Sevens players, obviously, they played at the Olympics and all that, and were part of those Olympic and Commonwealth Games systems, and they were like, but there's only so much we can do on the Sevens circuit, and there just isn't the money there, so they've gone to league because rugby league is expanding massively as a semi-professional / professional sport in the women's game. So rugby union in Australia and to a certain extent New Zealand is in trouble. They've run out of money. Yet they are paying these rugby league players. And bearing in mind, Suoliti, while he's played State of Origin for New South Wales, has represented Samoa at Test level in rugby league, and played in a Rugby League World Cup final. While there's no doubt he's a very talented athlete and a brilliant player, so is Martin Wanganita-Wasa. They're both brilliant players. And while he's hit it, his first full year, he's hit the ground running, which is obviously fantastic. The salary cap in the NRL is going to explode soon, and then he will go back to league. As soon as that World Cup is done, he's leaving union, he's going back to league. That's what's been suggested. It means his agent's going to get that money. Rugby union does not have the cash. Rugby Australia are relying on this Lions tour to be highly successful for them. If they get a whitewash, I think that will hurt them badly. The fact that their coach is a Kiwi is not a good look. And Schmidt is a brilliant coach. There's no doubt John Schmidt's a brilliant coach, but he's not Australian, he's a Kiwi. And that, I don't think, if this goes badly for Australia and the Lions whitewash them, that's going to be some fallout. The way they treated Eddie Jones second time around, there was some fallout there after that World Cup. And that being an absolute debacle. But the fact that, people are saying it should be a 3-0 whitewash, the Lions should this rugby union in Australia is not in a healthy place right now. It really isn't. And another thing is that some of the best Australian players aren't even in Australia. You have to be domestically based in Australia to get selected for the test side. And that's why we've got some Australian-born players who've gone to Europe to play, or North America, got residency, and now represent other nations. And because they've represented other nations, they can't represent Australia unless they haven't represented that nation for about 7 years. I think it has lost significance. Only one Welsh starter. There's a reason for that. There's only one Welsh player in the squad and he's injured. That's why there was no Welsh starter. And that in itself, the first time in history that there's not a Welsh player in the starting lineup for a Lions test match, tells you all you need to know about the state of Welsh rugby. The fact they finally ended their losing streak against Japan after blowing it in that first test is obviously putting a lot of pressure on the Welsh Union because of that lengthy losing streak. The fact they've only won one test match in the best part of 2 years is really worrying with the state of rugby union. And with Premiership becoming a closed shop with their rebrand, oh yes, their expensive rebrand, and with Premiership clubs struggling financially, and it's true they are, and this protectionism closed shop because you've got to reach a certain stadium capacity and threshold and reach certain is hurting the club game in England. In Europe, the only countries, ironically, at club level which are not struggling financially are Ireland, Italy, and France. Scotland's got problems. Ireland, Italy, and France. Look at the player development. Look at the under-20s. Look at the Italian under-20s. That's scary. Ireland's just got a production line. They're really good at identifying talent and getting them through the system. Scotland, with their limited player base, to be fair, are punch above their weight. Italy are starting to punch above their weight, but they have a semi-professional league below the URC where they can select talent from. The French top tier and second tier is ridiculous. And an average player can earn twice as much money in France than they can in England or Wales. And with the Welsh selection rules to represent Wales being as they are, and the selection rules for England, it's killing the game. You could argue it's a restraint of trade, and you are being punished for going overseas to maximise your earnings, whether that's right or wrong, by having the right to represent your country taken away from you. And I think we need a stronger players' association or players' union in rugby union across Europe. I think we need a European-wide players' union. I think the same is now true in France, where if you play outside France, you can't represent France. But the French players don't need to play outside France anymore because they're getting paid now. They've worked a good TV deal. Owners have got money. The league's making money. Players are well compensated for they're well paid. But you could argue that the selection rules for Test nations could be classed as a restraint of trade. And this is something that I think rugby union is lacking. They need a stronger players association / players union. I think that is desperately needed, honestly. But I would say this. I think with what Sky Sports in the UK at least are charging to watch the Lions tour on top of your subscription is ridiculous. And yeah, I think it has lost a bit of significance. I think it has. I think Argentina deserve a Lions tour, personally. The fact that the Argentinians beat the Lions in that warm-up test tells you that I think Argentina do deserve a Lions tour. They're part of the Rugby Championship. They're one of the best sides in the world. Without winning a World Cup, I think they do deserve a Lions tour. And that's something that needs to be considered. But look, for Rugby Australia and the home unions, Scotland, Wales, England, and Ireland, it's about money. That's all it's about. Well, every 3 years, but then it would then you've got to think of the World Cup cycle at this point. And you know, every 3 years, could that work? I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily would say they would have to shorten it. I think the format would have to change. I wouldn't say shorten the time gap. I would just say the format. Yeah, you could argue that. You could, but then that would then have a more disruptive impact on the international test calendar. But I do think Argentina does deserve a Lions tour, personally. That's personal opinion, and there'll be those who disagree with that. But I think Argentina does, at this point now, deserve that recognition. Yeah, but are Australia really the big three anymore? Because they are nowhere near the quality of what they were 12 years ago, and even then, Australia were on the decline. And they haven't been on the same level as South Africa, New Zealand, or even Argentina now for some time, if we're being honest. That last World Cup summed up where Australia are at: player development, player retention, coaching, pathways, finances. Yeah, but I think rugby union is starting to lose its tradition somewhat. And especially Australia, they are in deep trouble. But money-wise, across the big three and across rugby union in general, there's only a handful of countries that are actually unions or federations, depending on where you are in the world, who are actually in credit financially. A lot of them are struggling financially. Professionalism is and tier 1 or tier 2 status and all that, and match fees. Rugby's at a crossroads, and it's the discussion about rugby finances over the last 2 decades, 2.5 decades. Well, it's actually been 3 decades of professionalism now. The game's been professional for 30 years. Do I expect? I expect a response from Australia in the second test. Schmidt is a good coach, but you've only got to look at the debacle that was the World Cup for Australia and the aftermath of it, and the coaching turnover that Australia have had in the last few years. That there's big problems with where where we're at. If I'm being brutally honest, with where you're at, where we're at, and do I expect a 3? I expect a response, but looking at some of the articles that have already been circulating online over the last 24 hours, I think it would be historic if the Lions get a 3-0 series win. But is that really good for rugby union going forward? Because Australia are the next World Cup hosts. Obviously, they're coming off the back of a disastrous tournament in France 2 years ago. And the sport in Australia is facing a lot of tough conversations right now about funding, about accessibility, about the TV deal they've got domestically. Grassroots, the pathways, losing players to league, which they are. I've watched some Lions matches over my life, and we're going back to 90. I think the first Lions tour that I watched any time of was 97. But at the same time, there was periods growing up where we didn't have a lot of money and we didn't have Sky Sports for a while. And so because of that, putting it being behind a paywall to make money, basically. When we didn't have Sky Sports, you couldn't watch it. Just plain and simple. Unless I went around a friend's house and they were rugby union fans, which, let's be honest, only a handful of my friends are rugby union, hardcore rugby union, like proper rusted on union fans who are willing to either wake up really early in the morning or stay up late at night to watch a Lions tour, unless it's in South Africa. So when you're talking about New Zealand and Australia, sometimes you've got to be up early in the morning, depending on the time zone, or it's for me. Most of my friends that I have watched sport with, and I do occasionally have a beer these days. Back in the day, obviously, we'd have all nighters and do all that. Most of them are football fans, if we're being honest. Not many of my mates are into cricket or rugby league or even rugby union. So a lot of us do watch the boxing, however, I used to watch the boxing. But as I say, the Lions tour, I haven't watched many Lions tests, let's be honest. I've watched a few Lions tour matches, but because of the fact of Sky Sports putting it behind a paywall, growing up, there wasn't that accessibility to it when, as a kid, we didn't have a lot of money. Growing up, my mum was a single parent for a lot of the time, was a part-time student, part-time worker, had a part-time job in retail, and we didn't have a lot of money. And so that was an expense that we just couldn't afford, couldn't justify. Now, obviously, like my mum with my stepdad, obviously they're both in well-paying jobs. They do have Sky Sports. Absolutely, they will probably be watching. My stepdad probably did watch the test yesterday. Absolutely, when the cricket's on, he's probably watched a lot of the cricket. But when I was like my brother's age and younger, because my brother's a lot younger than me, and before my mum met my stepdad and before they got married and all that. And even in the first couple of years of when they got married, when my brother was, growing up, when he was a young kid, we didn't have Sky Sports. We went without. There was a good decade where we didn't. There was a period where we did, when my parents were still married, and then early on, where my mum was a single parent. But then as time went on, money was tight and we couldn't afford it. And I think this is where I think we need to be very, very careful when we're discussing ticket prices and broadcasting rights, is the accessibility. for free-to-air coverage or cheap viewing options, because every time on social media we talk about the Fire Sticks, and that gets mentioned, and illegal pirating and streaming and VPNs. There's a reason why so many people in this country decide to go down the dodgy Fire Stick route and use VPNs and find illegal streams, because it's the same. It's the same in North America. They're I think fans are being ripped off. Where do I rate Usyk? He's one of the greatest of all time. Yeah, at this point, yes. But as I say, he's still boxing, so that's a difficult one. Until he's actually retired, and then we can compare his body of work against a comparable fighter in the same weight division who's got a similar record, and then we can work out, okay, where does he rank against others of a comparable, with the amount of titles and his win-loss record and how quick he's done fights and all that. I think boxing has lost a lot of its value as well. I think boxing is definitely slipping down the pecking order in regards to sports. I think there's one, I can't remember what country the broadcast, I think it's in Canada, the pay-per-view is going to disappear. They're going to make it free to air or keep it on the current subscription service without that pay-per-view barrier in the way, because fans are just not buying the pay-per-view, and they've worked out people are pirating it. I forget which broadcaster it is, but there is a broadcaster that's got rid of its pay-per-view for boxing. They went, it's just not worth it. We're not making the money. I wouldn't say Sky Sports won't be around for much longer, but it's going to have to look at its structure, I think it's reached a point now where it's hurting some sports by the monopoly it has on certain sports rights. Like it's lost the Champions League, for example, and I do think that was a massive blunder, because the shared rights with free-to-air and Sky for the European Football Club competitions under the UEFA banner worked brilliantly. And then BT Sport came along and had that monopoly, and I think that really has damaged UEFA's reputation with fans. Again, we in this country at least pay too much. We can't even watch all the Premier League games because of the 3 p.m. blackout. And yeah, there's a lot of pushback against that, because it was brought in originally to protect fan and match day attendance. Well, there's empty seats all over the place, so fans can't afford to go to games anymore because the ticket price is so high. We were told, and this is the lie we were told, the economic lie we were told back in 1992. Having a subscription-based broadcaster, having the majority of the broadcast rights initially in 92, which was Sky, domestically, would keep ticket prices low. Now, the overseas broadcast rights are also worth hundreds of millions, if not billions of pounds, dollars, euros, whatever currency you want to discuss. It's worth millions and billions, right? And so we were told, obviously, back in the day, we were told, ticket prices would be reasonable. They're no longer reasonable. The price inflation on a monthly basis for what you get is price gouging. It's price gouging. Having multiple players in the market should bring down costs because you want to compete. They're all raising their prices. It's price gouging. Why do you think in Germany, third division clubs get sellouts? Like Dynamo Dresden, for example, they sell out every game. It's ridiculous. You've got 30, 40, 50,000 seater stadiums in the second Bundesliga that are sold out every week. And it costs less to get a flight to Germany, a taxi, a bus, or a train to the stadium, or a U-Bahn, which is their version of the underground. Match day ticket, food and drink, watch the game, and then get back to the UK, then one ticket for a Premier League game. That tells you all you need to know about how much we're being overpriced and fleeced. And fans have had enough. Fans have had enough. And it's all, and don't get me wrong, there are players in Germany that command similar wages to players here, right? The footballing economy is broken. And fans have said enough is enough. The lower league is on its arse. The lower leagues are on their knees. Clubs are buggered financially. The new PSR rules are just flouted by the same clubs that were breaking financial fair play. The punishments vary from club. If it's Chelsea or Man City, they get away with a fine. If it's Nottingham Forest and Everton, points deduction. So, and then they bring in another rule to stop Chelsea, Man City, and Aston Villa for selling their women's team back to themselves or a separate holding company or a hotel to then make them PSR compliant or FFP compliant. And then next season, those rules will change to prevent a club like Everton doing that, or Nottingham Forest, or a Luton, or whoever it is, Derby County. Well, I'm just naming clubs now that have had points deductions and administrations in the past. And then they'll find another way to flout it. Plain and simple. This Club World Cup has made sure that Man City and Chelsea can still get round financial fair play because of the prize money. The system is being manipulated, and they're blatantly doing it. They're doing it so public they don't care. They know technically what they're doing is within the rules, although it's morally wrong. And then UEFA and FIFA and the FA will come in and go, we're going to close that loophole. But Chelsea have already done it. It was the same when, the Man United and Chelsea takeovers at the time, which were leveraged buyouts, right? They brought in the fit and proper persons test as a result. As a well, that's more to do with the fans' dislike of the ownership. That's got nothing to do with ticket price. That's the season ticket sales have been shit for this season, and we hate the owners. I have not been to a Blackburn game since the Venkeys bought the club. I used to go to Blackburn's away games at like Portsmouth and Southampton and Watford and mostly Southampton. That was when Blackburn were playing Southampton at St Mary's, which would normally be the first game of the season. Ironically, that would be the game I would go to. And every time I've seen Blackburn play, they've won 2-1 at St Mary's. It's weird, but that would be the game that I would go to if I could to see my team play, because obviously where I live. But since the Venkeys have taken over, I refuse to give them money. I have not bought a Blackburn kit. I've not bought any scarves, hats, posters, anything, any memorabilia, because a proportion of that goes to the Venkeys, who are just mismanaging the club. And there is a lot of fan protest. The fans, the relationship between the fans and the owners is never been great since the Venkeys have owned the club. It's gone now. There is no trust there. All the bridges have been burned. There's a growing push for them to get out and sell the club. Fan protests are there. And people say, we're fair weather fans. You look at the attendance before the Venkeys took over. It was always good. It was never like sellout week after week, but it was higher than what it is now. That's fan discontent with ownership. And there's a lot of clubs like that where the relationship between the fans and the owners is completely gone. The trust is gone. The relationship's not great. We're not the only club where the fan base and the ownership have a poor relationship. And we're not the only club with a lot of debt. And make of that what you will. The Premier League are hinting at getting their own streaming service, but whether that still has the 3 p.m. blackout or not, because it's at the moment that's still a thing. And talking about broadcasting blackouts, you get that in North America with the major leagues as well. It's something that something to do with anti-siphoning laws, and there is that growing debate. And I think only 87 of the MPs voted in favour to scrap the 3 p.m. blackout, which was a petition put to Parliament. It reached the threshold to be discussed. I think there was a private member's bill to bring it forward as legislation. So there was that. What did I make of Trump bombing the trophy parade? What for the Club World Cup? I didn't watch any of the FIFA Club World Cup anyway, so it doesn't bother me. We've seen heads of state give out trophies and mingle with winning teams before in a variety of sports. And we've seen, oh God, my Instagram is going mad here. So to me, it's not unusual. I think because of who he is and his government's policies, and we've had, now, right, so I remember many years ago, I think it was 2018 in Trump's first term, I was asked my opinion, not only on Donald Trump, but US politics. And I went, and this is one of my longer live streams. I think it's one of the longest live streams we've ever ever done on the channel. It was back in 2018. I think it was about the time. Was it before or during or after the World Cup? It was in the height of summer. I think it might have been just before the World Cup 2018 or just after. And I was doing a live stream and I'm sat in the spare room and I put the laptop on the TV, Xbox table that I had. Oh God, Jane. And I was doing a live stream and there was an American, I think it was an American viewer. I think it was one of the American viewers that we have. And he asked my opinion on Donald Trump and his administration back in 2018. So this is his first term. And then he also asked my opinion on the Democratic opposition and why, Clinton and Hillary and all that. And I went off on a rant. It was quite funny. A very expletive-ridden rant that lasted about an hour and a half. And it was like a 6.5-hour live stream. And I just went off on one. And I'm not saying our country's perfect, and I'm not saying any country's perfect with their political system or anything like that. And that was the day I decided no politics on the channel. That was the day I went, and I watched I went through the live stream and I found the moment where I got asked the question. I looked at the chat because when you have the live replay that gets posted on the channel, I found on the chat where the question was asked. And I found the moment, and I watched, and I actually timed it, and it was about an hour and a half, and I go off on one, and that was the next day, and I was thinking, okay, let's get. I'm planning what time I'm going to do the live stream because it was obviously middle of summer, and I knew there'd be people in the evening. And I thought I'll get my notebook out and I might put down some points that I want to discuss, as I always do at the opening of the live stream. This is what I'm going to discuss this evening. You can ask me questions on anything. And so I made a rule, house rules. I thought no more politics. We're not going to discuss it, anything like that. And I'm watching it, and I thought I just pissed myself laughing. And I'll probably try and find the live stream. I'll try and find it. It's one from 2018. I absolutely just laughed for about. I just played that hour and a half section, and I just absolutely, just wet myself with laughter. I thought, God, no, I can't do this again. And then that evening, do another live stream. And that person who asked the question about my views on Trump and Democrats and Republicans and American politics was in the live stream. He was asking some questions. sport related. Much to do with North American sports, obviously, because he was an American. And someone else came into the chat and went, "What are my views on Trump and the Republicans and Bernie Sanders and the Democrats and Hillary Clinton?" And before I could even answer, the viewer who had asked the question the night before, but we don't do that here. He said, "No, we did it last night." And he put in the URL link for the video from the night before and the timestamps, because he'd also obviously remember watching the video. And he sent the guy, said, "Just watch last night. This is why we don't do it." And I was like, so now even my viewers have decided no politics on the channel unless it can't be avoided. For example, the World Championship Athletics in 2029, the London Mayor's Office are backing a London bid to host the World Championship Athletics in 2029, for example. That's where you can't avoid it, and that is true. But yeah, that just it. I just laughed. I've got to try and find that live stream and go. I think I've done about 200 live streams at this point. So that's a lot. That's 7 years worth of live streams I've got to go through to find the one from 2018 where I have my Trump rant and my US politics rant, because it's so funny. It's so funny. I think it's one of the more popular live streams as well. It's one with a lot of views. We had a lot of people, a lot of viewers in the chat, a lot of people from all around the world. It's just so funny. It's absolutely hilarious. But that was a long time ago, and a lot's happened between then and now. And it looks like we've gone full circle. He threatened the owners of the Commanders and the Guardians to Well, that was the Cleveland Indians and the Washington Redskins were their original names, and now it's the Washington Commanders and the Cleveland Guardians. Oh yeah, because it's war on the liberal left. It doesn't bother me. Teams will rebrand, and the Toronto Maple Leafs have had 5 different names. You are aware of that, right? And none of their names were offensive. Yeah, it's the culture wars, as they call it. Look, again, this is where sports and politics. This is the area where you shouldn't have that kind of political involvement. These are professional sports. These were professional decisions by owners to go, "We're going to rebrand. We're going to rename." We are facing public pressure and protests and boycotts. It's damaging our brand. Certain people we've got fans staying away. So this is a business decision and a sporting decision. We're going to rebrand. So that's where I think that's a PR decision. Those two organ. Well, especially with what was the Washington Redskins, now the Washington Commanders. Dan Schneider, the former owner, there was so many PR. That was just a PR nightmare. That was a team surrounded by scandal and negative headlines and lawsuits. And in the end, a rebrand was necessary, regardless that they decided to choose potentially, the worst name, which doesn't really Commanders. They can't really use the Senators because the Ottawa Senators have that trademarked in North America. And so they were a bit hamstrung with what they could call the team. But under the previous ownership of when it was the Redskins branding, there were so many negative headlines. There were lawsuits all over the place. There was harassment lawsuits, bullying allegations, and Dan Schneider was basically forced to sell the team by the other NFL owners. And there are some bad owners in the NFL with some sleaze surrounding them. So if they're going, "We don't want you as an owner, you're bad for our image," that just tells you how bad Dan Schneider was. And that dragged on for a while. He was basically forced to sell the team. It was like the guy who used to own the LA Clippers was forced to sell the team again because of he made racial slurs. Dan Schneider was a sex pest. The former LA Clippers owner was a bit of a sleazy character. He was forced to sell the team. I've got to do a video on him, and I forget his name. There are some really, really bad owners in American pro sports. Oh my god, they make some of the bad ownership we've got here in English football or European football look nothing. They're saints compared to some of the North American owners who are just, in my opinion, shocking. And you look at some of the lawsuits and allegations coming out about some of the ownership groups and individuals who own sports teams in North America. Jesus, Howard Ballard, former Maple Leafs owner, he was a character and not well liked. I forget the guy who used to own the LA Clippers, but God, he was terrible. And he was forced to sell the team. I think he's still alive. And Dan Schneider, I mean, Jesus. Yeah, I know. I know, it's hilarious. The irony on that is not lost on me at all. And I just tried joking on air. Yeah, the irony of that. I need to get another drink. Oh God. Yeah, the irony of that is not lost on me. I will stress that. That is not lost on me at all. But look, the fans were given an option of renaming the team. They were given, here's the options you can vote for. That was the name that was chosen as part of the rebrand to break with the Dan Schneider era and with the new ownership and a fresh start. But the fact that he's trying to put pressure on on these leagues and teams to revert to old branding that was tired, it was old. The Cleveland Guardians, though, the former, haven't changed their logo. They just changed their name. So, but at the same time, if you were to ask Native Americans about the Chicago Blackhawks, a lot of them go, "Well, that's so and so chief from so and so tribe." The fact that they are honouring him with having his identity as their logo is a great honour in their culture. And so you've got to be careful, because I don't think the Native American population and fans of those of Native American heritage were actually consulted when the NFL and Major League Baseball basically said you rebrand, basically. And a lot of them have come out and actually defended the Chicago Blackhawks with their current logo and current name and current branding. Because there's been growing pressure for the Chicago Blackhawks to change their name. There's been growing pressure on the Brisbane Broncos and the NRL in Australia to change their name and buck the Bronco to be retired by PETA, the animal rights organisation. And they've been very politely told to go away by many within rugby league, and many rugby league fans have politely told PETA to please go away. So it's the same with the Exeter Chiefs. They've had to rebrand from having a Native American to a Celtic, Viking, Saxon kind of logo, warrior, which again, they didn't change their name, they changed their logo and their branding. That's all they've done. And I think their new logo looks shit, being honest. I love the Exeter Chiefs. It cost them a lot of money. It weren't cheap, because they've got to come up. They said, "Well, can we keep the name?" And the loony lefty's like, "Yeah, keep the name. You can't use a Native American. It's racist. You've got to use like a Viking or a Celt or a Saxon." Is like, well, okay. And so they came up with this kind of Northern European warrior head, like a Viking raider / Saxon Celtic kind of armored warrior. And I'm thinking, okay, they look like the Glasgow Clan ice hockey team. They look like the Crusaders branding down in New Zealand with the rugby union team. They look like the Canberra Raiders NRL team, and you could get sued here because now you've changed your logo, which looks very, very similar to other professional sports teams' logos. And you're thinking there could be a lawsuit here, and Exeter are losing money right now, and it's already cost them a lot of money to rebrand. And it's just ridiculous. I'm not an overly political person. I don't lean to the left or the right. I'm very live and let live. I have no interest in leaning to the left or the right. I'm not a massive fan of politics anyway. I think they're all in it for themselves. That's my view on politics. So I have no trust in politicians and their policies. I think they're just they don't live in the real world. And some of these pressure groups are white, middle class, university educated, allegedly, underemployed yuppies. My view on them. They don't live in the real world. They live in a champagne socialist bubble. And they get offended on other people's behalf without actually asking the people who are allegedly offended what they feel on things. It's like Cartoon Network and Speedy Gonzales. The character, cartoon character, and Jose, his brother, were I forget which studio it was. Was it Hanna-Barbera or something? There was pressure from a left-wing student body going, this is offensive to Mexicans and Latin Americans. It must be removed. 2 weeks later, they reinstated the character because many, many Latin Americans and Hispanics were like, we find him hilarious. It's a funny stereotype. We actually like it. Bring him back. We weren't consulted on the character being removed. It's like Apu in The Simpsons. Like white middle class champagne socialists and the Indian and Hindu and Sikh populations in North America actually found Apu hilarious. And then you got these voice actors like Hank Azaria coming out and apologizing. And I'm thinking, were the people who were allegedly offended by a cartoon character, or in this case, a sports team's branding, actually consulted? And the answer was no. But I will say this, harking back to it, when it was Dan Schneider and it was the Washington Redskins, the PR nightmare that organization was going through with all the negative headlines and the lawsuits and the scandal, a rebrand was necessary. Cleveland Indians, being now called the Cleveland Guardians, they were just like, we'll get ahead of the curve. We're seeing what's happening over in DC with Dan Schneider and the NFL. We're going to get ahead of the curve. We're just going to get ahead of it. There's a strong movement right now. We'll just very quickly rebrand. Won't take long. It's not going to cost a lot of money. Let's just avoid any kind of PR headache and nightmare when it comes to branding. We'll just do it. The Blackhawks have gone, and there's a lot of First Nations, and Native American players who actually play ice hockey, and there's never been any one of them from the Canadian First Nation or Métis community or the Native American US community who play the game or who coach in the game, who've come out and said, change that branding. And the fan base, there's a large Native American and First Nations, because Canada, has a different way of talking about it, and Métis, which is a mixed race population. And then you got the not the Inuit, you can't call them Inuits, the people from you got the not Inuit, is it? There's got First Nation, Métis, Native American, and then there's from the Canadian Arctic and Northern Alaska. They have their own designation as a demographic. Not one of them has said the Chicago Blackhawks need to change their name. Not one of them has come out and said this is offensive. And a lot of them are ice hockey fans. They love the sport. It's a big integral part of their communities. And not one of them has come out and said, yeah, change the name. Not one. So this is where I find these forced rebrand. But at the same time, Donald Trump is appealing to his voter base. Ironically, he's a Republican in a Democrat city because Washington DC is heavily Democrat. So and a lot of their fan base is Democrat. So, but yeah, we'll. But then there's in regards to the Kansas City Chiefs. International penalty rebounds in what sport? I forget which sport that is now. International. What does IFAB stand for? I forget. There's so many sporting governing bodies. Penalty rebound. Is that basketball? Please tell me that's basketball. IFAB. What does that? IFAB. IFAB. I forget what IFB. I know there's a sport where the penalty rebounds is being. What is IFB? IFAB. Wait, so they're gonna take away. So if a goalkeeper saves a penalty in 90 minutes, so it's a penalty given, that means players can't come in and then attempt to score off the rebound. Are you telling me they're taking that away? No. That is stupid. Sporting anachronisms. I'm going to double check if this has actually been confirmed or is this just proposed. Because they always propose. Oh god. Proper. I like the way you put proper football. That's going to trigger some people around the world, especially down under and in North America. Right. Wow. Here we go. Introduction. The penalty kick. Okay. Procedure. The ball must be stationary. Part of the ball touching or overhanging the centre of the penalty mark and goalpost. Crossbar and goal must not be moved. Well, right. The ball must be stationary. Right. This is what the no. What do you mean? It'd be a goal kick. So if the keeper saves it, and it goes behind, and he pushes it behind or above the bar, or he or she saves it and pushes it behind the post or over the bar. It's no longer a corner. That's not a class as a rebound, right? The ball must be stationary, with part of the ball touching or overhanging the centre of the penalty mark, and the goalpost, crossbar, and goal net must not be moving. Well, that's going to be interesting if it's a bit windy, isn't it? Or if it's pissing down with rain, because that would mean the net is moving. The player taking the penalty kick must be clearly identified. The defending goalkeeper must remain on the goal line, we knew that, facing the kicker between the goalposts until the ball is kicked. The goalkeeper must not behave in a way that unfairly distracts the kicker. Okay, delay a taking of the kick to touch the goalpost, crossbar, or goal net. So we can wobble on the spot, so you can still do a Bruce Grobbler. The players, other than the kicker and the goalkeeper, must be at least 9.15 metres or 10 yards from the penalty spot, behind the penalty mark, inside the field play, and outside the penalty area. After players have taken positions in accordance with the law, the referee signals for the kick to be taken. The player must kick the ball forward. Backheeling is permitted provided the ball moves forward. So you can actually backheel it backwards into the net. That is interesting, as long as the ball moves forward off the spot. When the ball is kicked, the defending goalkeeper must have at least one part of 1 foot touching in line with or behind the goal line. The ball is in play when it's kicked and clearly moves. The kicker must not play the ball again until it's touched another player. The penalty kick is complete when the ball stops moving, goes out of play, or the referee stops play for an offence. Additional time is allowed for a penalty kick to be taken and completed at the end of each half of the match or extra time. When additional time is allowed, the penalty kick is completed when after the kick has been taken, the ball stops moving, goes out of play. Wait, now. If a defending team player, including the goalkeeper, commits an offence and the penalty is missed or saved, the penalty is retaken, not an offensive player. offences and sanctions. Once the referee signal for a penalty kick taken, this says nothing about rebounds. And this is, I'm on the official law here. I'm actually on the official website. Summary table. Right. Outcome of the penalty kick. Wow. Okay. So actually, at the moment, from what I can gather, yeah, the penalty kick is completed. I actually think, I can't believe apparently you can backheel the ball into the net. That's brilliant. I think that's fantastic. Yeah, there's. It doesn't say no at the moment. It does say this. Additional time is allowed for a penalty kick to be taken. Forget that my phone has now gone completely mad. Additional time is allowed for a penalty kick to be taken and completed at the end of each half. The penalty kick is completed. The penalty kick is completed when, after the kick has been taken, the ball stops moving, goes out of play, is played by any other player, including the kicker, other than the defending goalkeeper, or the referee stops for an offence by the kicker or the kicker's team. If an offence is committed by the defending team, it's retaken. So, played by any other player, including the kicker. So that means other than the defending goalkeeper. So the goalkeeper saved it, or it's hit a post, it's bounced back out, then you can hit the rebound. So it's only proposed. I can't see them changing that because the rebound and the scramble is great fun to watch. The only reason I can think that I've just got a message from a friend. So the fact it's proposed, whether that actually gets adopted or not, or trialed as a law change, will be interesting. And I can't see that becoming a rule change. I also can't see if the keeper saves it and pushes it behind it should be a corner because the ball's gone out of play off a player, and the opposition should get possession from a corner or a throw-in. So that then completely alters the dynamic of the game. If the penalty is saved and the keeper pushes it beyond the post or over the bar, it's always a corner to the opposition team. If the player misses the goal completely, then it's a goal kick. I cannot see that being a rule change. I can see that being proposed and rejected. Some of the ideas they come up with are stupid, to be frankly honest. I can't. That if a goalkeeper saves it, be a goal. That's ridiculous. It's only proposed, and there was a few more changes that are just type. To be honest, I think it's a stupid proposition. You have that heart in your mouth moment when there is a rebound, the ball's pinged off a post or been saved, and the players all, because we've seen some good penalty saves in the Women's Euros, and it adds that bit of jeopardy and a bit of excitement. We want to keep the game exciting. You take away some of that excitement, you're going to turn fans off. And we've already seen a lot of frustration with how VAR has been implemented, how the offside rule has been implemented because of VAR and the delayed offsides, the change to the handball, deliberate accidental. The referees becoming a lot more reliant on VAR to bail them out and the semi-automated offside to bail them out. So the refereeing standards actually got worse rather than better. I think players are being overcoached as well. We're losing a bit of flair from the game. We're losing some speed from the game. The game has actually slowed down, in my opinion. The quality has dropped because we are overcoaching. Rather than allowing players to play what's in front of them. There have been some stupid proposals like the golden goal and silver goal rule, which didn't last very long, ironically. They very quickly didn't last. They went back to a normal extra time and penalties. That didn't last very long. Laurent Blanc was the first player to score a golden goal, and it was at the 98 World Cup. Thought I'll drop that little nugget in there for France. But there have been some stupid proposed rules. The golden they've experimented at World Cups, Women's World Cups and Men's World Cups with rule variations. I felt sorry in 2019 when the Women's World Cup they experimented with the goalkeeper having to stand on the line and all that. I think it was less than that. I think it might have been less than that before the silver, and then very, very quickly they realised teams became really defensive and didn't want to play and didn't want to attack. And so games became very predictable. And there was allegations of match fixing. When you found out next goal wins, teams just went, right, we're going to defend. We're going to take this penalties. And a lot of people bet it'll be a penalty shootout. I think the game was France-Paraguay, if I remember, where the golden goal was scored by Laurent Blanc in the World Cup in 98. I remember watching it as well. And it was just like, what's going on? Really? And it was an anticlimax when he scored it. It was an anticlimax when he scored it, and fans were like, oh, it's done. Whereas in Euro 96, obviously, we had the heartbreak and the tension of England-Germany and England-Spain in the Euros, which both went to extra time and penalties. And they were two of the most watched extra time and penalty shootouts of all time in Europe. I think even across the world. But look, I was only a kid. I remember watching that game, and I do remember the silver goal didn't last. It lasted even less time, and very, very quickly, FIFA realised that fans were not enjoying it, and while it brought that jeopardy in, teams just went full defence mode, and the pace of the game dropped off. Rather than fatigue opening up the game, coaches would make that last tactical change or substitution and go, we're going to go ultra defensive. We're going to drop back, have five at the back or five in midfield, stick one bloke up front and just hoof the ball long. And it was not entertaining football. And yeah, penalties is just a lottery, and therefore you have no choice. And so, yeah, and penalties bring that tension and viewership figures. And FIFA actually looked at the TV viewership figures as well. When extra time became really predictable and went to more penalty shootouts than less, which was the idea, was to reduce the amount of penalty shootouts and therefore, player fatigue. So if they were playing extra time, they could go into the next game having played less minutes than if they'd gone the full 30 minutes plus penalty shootout. When they realised more games went the distance than less, so they were going, we'll have less penalty shootouts. In fact, there were more penalty shootouts than before the rule change. When it came to percentages, they were like this, yeah. And that was one of the few times FIFA actually listened to fans and we're going to scrap this rule. That was one of the few times the IFAB, I forget the International Federation of Association, yeah. That's one of the few times the rule makers went, we've cocked up. That is one of the few times. The fact that they also had to be the body that came and said, we'll agree with goal line tech. It took that long from it being proposed in the 90s until 2014 to get goal line tech at the World Cup in 2014 in Brazil. It took another 4 years to get VAR at the World Cup in Russia, with a year of experimentation in the 2017-2018 season. And in the biggest game in Australia, the A-League final, it failed, embarrassingly so. But no, I mean, look, the penalty shootout last night, for example, between France and Germany. I'm actually really surprised in women's football. France have got the worst record of international football when it comes to penalty shootouts. Worst record. I don't think they've ever won one. How Germany won that game last night is, in my opinion, beyond me. Germany's discipline was shocking. But then France didn't have a plan B. When Germany decided, right, we've done the smash and grab, we've gone up the other end, we've got the goal. We're going to just basically do a block shape and just compact the midfield. France didn't have a plan B. They did not have a plan B. And yeah, they just look very, very ordinary. And it makes you wonder why England were so bad in that opening game. Because if England played to how they played, even against Sweden, there was some sloppiness, but they were more exciting. They found solutions to the problem. Going behind, okay, we won't panic. We'll get back into this. And if we'd won that opening game, I think with the way England had played and the way Germany had been playing, England would have had Germany in the 90 minutes. France did not have a plan B. They were not tactically flexible. They were sloppy. They lost control of the game very quickly. They didn't get that second goal or create enough and play with enough tempo after scoring early on. They lost their way. They lost their tempo. They lost their control. Germany just went into a condensed midfield, kept the striker up top, and rotated the supporting midfield players who would go and run along or hold the ball up and into play. Well, in the women's game, I think when it comes to domestic league, I think we have more penalties in domestic league play, be it cup or league games. And so therefore more players take penalties for their clubs. Plus the conversion rate for penalties in the English women's game domestically is about 90%. I don't know what it's like in the French women's game domestically, but in England it's around 9% conversion rate for penalties, which is surprising. I think that's a pretty standard. It's in the 80s to 90% standard across the European women's leagues. So at this tournament, I'm really surprised it's in the low 50s% for conversion rate for penalties at the tournament. Isn't an achievement for the Welsh women, even though they got battered in all three games. They got here. It's a learning curve. The younger players will take a lot from the experience of being in a tournament environment and not just a Nations League handful of games, and then you have a little short international break and go back to your club. So this is the first time post-season they've been in a international tournament environment. And so that will benefit the younger players. The coaching staff will learn a lot as well about preparation, getting the right training camp, getting the right base and I think they will qualify again for another tournament. I think same with Scotland. I think they'll qualify. Northern Ireland did it at the last Euros, so I do think that below England with the other home nations and the Republic, there is. The Republic, literally, it was a playoff. The Republic could have been the team going. So I do think that gap is closing between the other home nations and Ireland and England, and also other bigger nations, more successful nations in Europe. I think that gap is closing. The growth of women's sport, not just in Europe and not just in the UK, but globally, is there over the last decade to 15 years. And so I think they will have learned a lot from this experience. That they did actually have quite an experienced side, but there were some young players there, and so that next generation of something to aspire to and aim for. And look at the struggles rugby union's having in Wales, which is meant to be the national sport. More and more kids are choosing football over rugby union. The FAW have definitely got the pathways in place for both the men's and women's games now for player development that they just didn't have before. With the success of Wrexham and the fact that Newport are back in the professional Football League, and you've got Cardiff and Swansea stable in the Football League, and Wrexham are on the up, that has created a renewed interest with fans. And when you have young fans, you're going to have future players. And so with Wrexham's success and upward trajectory, with Newport County being a stable Football League side now again, with Cardiff and Swansea having had that Premier League experience, Swansea winning a major trophy, Cardiff making an FA Cup final, in the last 20 years, that in itself has tipped the balance in Wales in favour of football over rugby union. And that, is a big thing. That is a big thing. And seeing both the men and women now qualify for major tournaments is going to inspire a lot more young people, young kids, to want to choose that over rugby. I haven't played Footy Manager in years, and I have no intention of playing Footy Manager again. I don't know. I don't have the time for Football Manager these days. I would love to, but I just don't have the time. Spain, Germany. If Germany's discipline has been shocking, they've run out of right backs. They've gone through 4 right backs. 2 are injured and 2 are suspended. So I don't know what they're going to do there. And I think is it 3 games for a straight red. So the other one that got sent off in the group stage, I think the earliest she can come, but will she play in the final? Will she be able to play? Or was it 2 games? I can't remember. I can't remember how long he gets suspended for a red card in the tournament because the tournament's so short. Boffin, who do you think the biggest football club is in the world? Well, for fan base, well, Wrexham have the largest catchment area. Cardiff is obviously the biggest city. Swansea have had the more recent success with the League Cup and playing in Europe. Newport, Cardiff, and Swansea have a very congested catchment area. If I'm going to be, if I can say so. At the moment, Wrexham has got the bigger brand recognition, both domestically and outside of the UK. But in returns to fan base, I think they're all about equal size. I would say that. I would say all 4 clubs in the Football League right now, I would say the fan base is all about equal size. Attendance-wise, that's a different thing. That is what percentage of stadium filled or actual fan numbers of fans in. That in itself becomes a bit of a different topic. You've got paid and actual attendance, then you've got capacity of the stadiums they play in, plus percentage of capacity, and then actual number of fans turning up. Because there is a disconnect between fans and Cardiff's fans hate their owner. Swansea's owners are American, and you could argue they don't necessarily have the best relationship. Newport, they just don't have a lot of money, and so I think they're at their ceiling at the moment. Although, given a decent season or selling a couple of promising, talented youngsters, they could potentially make a bit of money to add to their budget, to then try and look at the next league up. But they don't have money. And Wrexham obviously are this Hollywood story, which has got a global brand recognition, which means actually their fan base overseas has grown. So I would say it's about equal. I wouldn't say one's bigger than the others. I think there's a limited. They also have that. They have limited catchment areas in regards to population size that will go, because the rivalry between towns in Wales, or the one valley to another, is intense. Just look at rugby union, you look at football, it is intense. The problem with Newport is they don't have a lot of money and they had to reform. But in saying that, there's been a team in Newport for a long time. It's just they had to reform and start again. They do not have the money that the other clubs do. But in saying that, I would say they're all about equal. I'm not being honest. That all four of them will claim they're got the biggest fan base in Wales, and they're the most popular club. But think about it. Wrexham have got that global recognition with the ownership. Cardiff have got the silverware and the highest league finishing position behind them. Swansea had the most recent success behind them. Newport just don't have the money, but Wrexham have won the most Welsh Cups, so there is that. Wrexham are a much older club as well, so they're more established. So it's really that is a subjective question with a subjective answer. So I don't do power rankings either. I could do an NRL power rankings right now, for example, and I don't. But at the end of the day, again, it is a subjective question. Wrexham are the oldest club. They're the oldest club in Wales. And I think they're the third or fourth oldest club in existence, in continuous existence. And they've won the most Welsh Cups. So there is that. Well, Wrexham's biggest rivals are Shrewsbury, which are across the border, but Wrexham has a large catchment area. Admittedly, outside of Wrexham, it is very rural, though, whereas Cardiff, Swansea, and Newport are all very close together. And those three, Newport's still a town, but Swansea and Cardiff are cities, and they don't like each other. There is that historical rivalry, going back to, well, yes, but they're more likely to be playing Shrewsbury than Chester these days. Wrexham, their rivalry with Shrewsbury is kind of nasty. Chester, they're not on the same level as Wrexham. They're less likely. They're not going to meet in the League Cup. And the likelihood of them meeting the FA Cup is very slim. Shrewsbury have a better chance of going further in the FA Cup than Chester and have a better chance of potentially being drawn again. Plus, Chester's gone bust and reformed, whereas Shrewsbury's been in continuous existence since foundation. So I think Wrexham have played Shrewsbury more often historically. I have to double check on that. Because of Chester's financial implosion and refounding, they dropped down the non-league divisions to a lower level than where Wrexham ended up in the conference, which became the National League. And because Tranmere did spend a little spell in the National League for a couple of seasons, as did Shrewsbury, they played more regularly. And because Shrewsbury and Tranmere have also been in the Football League for a while now, when Wrexham came back up, they crossed paths. So Shrewsbury and Tranmere are more likely to be clashing with Wrexham. But again, I mean, it's a big catchment area. It's a big catchment area in North and Central Wales for Wrexham, not only to have fans from the city of Wrexham itself, but from a huge portion of Wales and parts of England as well. Wrexham does have some English fans as well. But again, when it comes to the city, well, from the Merseyside area, people tend to forget Tranmere is in Birkenhead and the Wirral, which is part of Merseyside, and I think because of the lack of, but here's Dixie Dean actually started his career at Tranmere before going to Everton. But you didn't know that Dixie Dean was a Tranmere lad. He was from the Wirral, and then played for Tranmere, and then Everton came along, and the rest is history. But you didn't know that. He was a Wirral lad. So not a true Scouser, because the Wirral used to be part of Chester, and a bit of it used to be part of Flintshire in Wales, and then boundary changes and crap. But no, Tranmere, I think, okay, admittedly, they haven't, Tranmere and Everton and Liverpool, because Liverpool and Everton spent so long in the top flight. Liverpool and Everton only spent a handful of seasons outside the top flight, whereas Tranmere, I don't think have ever been in the top flight. That's why Ian Rush ended up playing for Liverpool, because Ian Rush is actually from Flintshire, which is just across the Wirral, just across the River Dee. And hence why Michael Owen ended up playing for Liverpool. Owen's obviously a Welsh surname, and his dad played for Chester, and he's from that neck of the woods. So yeah, Tranmere. I think there is a bit of rivalry, especially when Tranmere's two most famous players played for the Scouts clubs, Dixie Dean and John Aldridge. But that surprised you. John Aldridge played for Tranmere. Tranmere's two most famous players, one played for Everton, one played for Liverpool. So bear that in mind. And this is the thing. But at the same point, I do think there is some rivalry there from little brother to the two big brothers. And look, given the right ownership, Tranmere, if they had the right owner, could hypothetically do a Wrexham and climb up the divisions. You say that, but Tranmere's got I think, an underrated fan base. I said that in the Tranmere history video I did. And that video, when I look at the football club histories, Port Vale is the most watched football club history video I've ever done. Port Vale had the most views. Port Vale. I'm considering on my week off at the end of the month to do some more football club histories of some of the European clubs and some of the lesser known European clubs, and look at some of the countries around Europe, like Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, and look at some of their clubs. They are, but the actual viewership for football club histories, Port Vale has the highest. I think Grimsby comes second and Wolves comes third when it comes to the football club history videos. That I think they're the three most popular. Carlisle was quite a popular video as well. That's getting a lot of views. Some of my Scottish club ones, like I think is it Dumbarton or Dunfermline? I know St Mirren did quite well. I think it might be my Dumbarton video. I think that's the top Scottish football club history video. No, Port Vale is not named after an area. It's not even got a town in its name or a village in its name or an area in its name. Port Vale is got its name because of the towns and villages along the canal in Staffordshire. Is it the Kennet and Avon? I can't remember what Stratford Avon is it. No, the Kennet and Avon goes from Berkshire to Somerset. There's the shipping canal. The towns and villages that grew up in Staffordshire with the potteries and the breweries. That's why they're called Port Vale. And they're the only club to beat every other club in the Football League. Port Vale has beaten every other club that has played in the Football League. There you go. And Robbie Williams is their most famous fan. And Phil Taylor, yes, they are the most famous fans. Yes, that is true. Port Vale are the only current Football League side that has beaten every other side that has played or currently plays in the Football League. There you go. Why do you think Port Vale was named after a pub? Oh, God. But yeah, they're the only Football League side that doesn't have a place name in the club name. There you go. They're named in honour of the towns and villages along the canal in Staffordshire that they are Football League heritage. Yes, they are. So that's. I think I named that. You have to watch the club history video that I did. But yeah, Port Vale, Grimsby, and Walsall's a quite a popular football club history video I've done. Carlisle's a popular one. The least popular one I think was QPR, which I found a bit weird, but is what it is. But no, yeah, the football club history. Some of the view counts. They're pretty solid. They're good background noise, as I call it. They're good background noise. Some of the German club ones did quite well. Some of the Italian ones did really well. Some of the Swiss ones did quite well. I've still got more Swiss clubs to do. I've got some more French clubs to do as well. I'm going to look at some of the, not, I wouldn't say more obscure leagues, but some of the lesser top flight European leagues, and then start just going, right, let's have a look at some of the clubs. No, it's named. Its name is in honor of the towns and villages that grew up around the canal, near Stoke and Burslem. But is it Burslem? Burslem, which formed part when Stoke was a separate, and then Burslem, and then it becomes, because they're based in Burslem and not actually in Stoke. Yeah, no, as I say, yeah, Port Vale's one of those clubs, and they have that unique bit of history where they're not named after a place or a location in a town or a city or a district, a town or a city, and they drop the Burslem bit, and you've got the towns and villages that actually make up Stoke along the canal is why Port Vale are called there where they are, because it's a vale of ports, canal ports. There you go. You didn't know that. And they are the only club to have beaten all current and former Football League sides. So every team that has ever played in the Football League, Port Vale have beaten at least once. And that includes defunct clubs as well. That's a fun stat. And so every time a club gets promoted into the Football League and Port Vale end up playing in the league and beat them, they add to their record. So there you go. Yeah, I mean, technically, yes, Port Vale is in the city of Stoke, but Burslem wasn't always part. Stoke only got city status. Oh shit! It's in the last 100 years. They weren't. Stoke wasn't always a city, so Stoke's changed their name as well. But there. Yeah, I don't know why they dropped it, but they did. I think they dropped it when Stoke got given city status. I think I'll have to double check. I'll have to double check my Port Vale history video, but they did drop the name, and for some reason, just Port Vale just stuck, and it's been with them ever since. So there you go. And they are one of the oldest clubs in existence as well. Yeah, because Burslem is not actually part of Stoke. It's now being incorporated into the city of Stoke, but actually it's not historically part of Stoke. It was a separate town, and Stoke was a separate town. And then there's, I think, 4 towns in together, including Stoke, form Stoke-on-Trent, the city that we know today. But historically, there are 2 separate towns in the Potteries. So the Potteries is that area of Staffordshire that produces pottery, ironically. And of course, then you've got Burton-on-Trent, which is also in Staffordshire, that's famous for its beer. Primarily the home of Carling. But you didn't know that. And so Burton Albion, there's the other team from Staffordshire. There you go. Greater Manchester is bits of South Yorkshire, Cheshire, and Lancashire have been chopped up, and I think a little bit of Derbyshire have been chopped up to form Greater Manchester. And yeah, well, you say that to someone from Bury or Salford or Altrincham or Oldham, Rochdale, Bolton, Wigan. Wigan's part of Great Manchester, by the way. You're probably not only going to get to do one, you probably get stabbed or headbutted. Yeah, that does aggravate a lot of people in Greater Manchester when they're called Manx. When if they're from Wigan or they're from Lee or Bury or Oldham or wherever, they don't see themselves as Mancunians. That is a portion of Greater Manchester, yes, but they don't see themselves. Salford. A lot of people think Salford is a district of Manchester. It's a separate city with its own cathedral and has had city status for over 100 years. So if you say to someone from Salford, you're a Mancunian, again, you're going to get told to do one. But yeah, no, Greater Manchester is strange because the original Bury, had 3 FA Cups. And then you've got Oldham Athletic. You've got Bolton Wanderers. You've got Wigan Athletic. You've got Rochdale, Salford City. Obviously, there's a lot of football clubs in Greater Manchester. It's mad. It is insane, absolutely insane. Oh God, now my mum wants something. Oh God, yeah. So basically, does anyone know any? Oh God, mum, shut up! I'm busy. Oh God, shit. Oh, so basically, does anyone have an iPhone? So you know, oh God, so it's taken 24 hours for because I have a Samsung and I have an older Android as well. It is a 4G phone. My mum's got a 5G ready um, iPhone, but for some reason it's not going to 4G when there's no 5G connectivity. It's going back to 3G, and then the phone decides to have a meltdown and a mare. And then when she got the phone, I gave her the code for my internet, my Wi-Fi, and should have been saved on the phone, so it could automatically connect. And I had to give her the code again. I'm like, your phone has gone bleh, and her phone has just completely had a meltdown for like the last God knows how long, and then it completely um, just it's it it I have so for some reason I've told her to go back to her network and so yeah, I've had Samsungs now for oh God. I used to be a Nokia guy. I'm this old. So I actually started out. My first phone was an Ericsson, not a Sony Ericsson, an Ericsson. So when they were a standalone mobile phone company, it was a hand me down. So my first phone was an Ericsson. My second phone was a Nokia 3310. I had two of no, did I have two or three of them? I think I had two of them. Then I got a 3330. Then I got a 6310. I got an 8310. I had 4410. I had basically about 4 or 5 Nokia. I even had the glow in the dark Nokia, which was hilarious. That was brilliant. That freaked my mum out at first when they said, it's green. Then I got my first Sony Ericsson. I forget which one it was in 2000. Was it 2005 or 2006? And then I had one, two, three. I had three. I think maybe 4 Sony Ericssons. Then I got my first Samsung in, I'm gonna say 2010, 2011. And then I've had Samsungs ever since. I had to borrow my sister's Samsung like slide phone, which had 2 SIM card holders. It was a bloody good phone actually. For a little bit in the mid when my phone was broken, I was in between phones and but I had to borrow it. I had to borrow a BlackBerry for 2 days, which just was weird. I had a BlackBerry for 2 days, didn't like it, did not like it. But I've been a Samsung user now for God. I borrowed my sister's Samsung for a while. I think I'm going to say late 2000s, early 2010s. And I got my first Samsung Android. This is going to be surprising for a lot of people. 2017. I got my first smartphone in 2017. That's mad, isn't it? I was late to get a smartphone. It took me until 2017 to get a smartphone. Yeah, I had a BlackBerry for like 2 days. I had to buy it, but my mate was like, "Yeah, I've got an unlocked BlackBerry. You can borrow it, or you can have it." It's just I had a spare phone, but you can have my BlackBerry. And I was like, I only need it until I get paid, so I can get a new phone. So I was on weekly pay at the time, and I was in between paychecks. So I only need it for like a couple of days. So I actually owned a BlackBerry for like 2 days. It was the weirdest experience I've ever had. It will not be. Um, but no, I got my first smartphone in 2017. I was 27. I was not even 28. I was 27 and a half. And I do believe it was almost 8 years to the day that my old Samsung slide phone just died. Just went bleh. It was a nice Samsung I had actually at the time for what it was for those 3G phones with buttons. You actually had to press buttons to text. Weird. Um, uh, no, I didn't. I never. I only had a BlackBerry because I had to borrow it off a mate, and they said it's my spare phone. You can have it for a little bit. So I had a BlackBerry for 2 days. And I just didn't like it. Did not like it at all. Um, and No, I got my first smartphone. I think I've had 4 smartphones. This one I've had for, is it 3 or 4 smartphones I've had now? Is it 3 or 4? No, this is my third smartphone. I've only had 3 smartphones, and they've all been Samsung. They've all been Android. And this one is getting on now. I will need to replace this at some point. It is on its last legs. Not going to lie. It's 5 years old. It's nearly 6 years old. It's 5.5 years old. It's 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 a war veteran at this point. Oh, um, but no, a few of my friends have Blackberries. But yeah, I was a bit late on the uptake getting a smartphone. My mate's like, "Oh, you're such a fossil or whatever." But I just didn't have the money. I just did not have the money to uh, to afford a contract or even afford a handset for top up and all that. And I got my rolling contract. Oh God, how long do I have that? I was with Orange at first. That was my first network, and then I was with T-Mobile, and then I went to EE. And while I was with T-Mobile, they you could get uh, you could get a rolling 30-day rolling contract. And oh God, that was on in the T-Mobile days. That's pre-EE. So that's oh God, that's what was that? Was that 2007? I think it was. Where was I working at the time? I was working in the paint factory at the time, and you didn't, and yeah, that was a that, yeah, yeah, that was Christ. That was about 2007. I got my first contract. I was on pay as you go before then, and I switched from Orange to T-Mobile because I had an issue with my top up, and it went wrong, and I was just not happy with the lack of signal. And then within a couple of years, EE formed, and they were a merger of the two companies. So I'd left one because I got pissed off with it. I'd gone to the other, and I was like, "Oh, T-Mobile's pretty good." And they merged together. Oh God! And then it turned out I was due an upgrade, and I became an EE customer, and that was I think 2017. So I was on this contract for donkeys. I kept the same SIM card for donkeys, and I think I've been on the same contract like 2007, 2008, long time. I've had the same number, and it was just yeah. So yeah, it's been a very yeah. I don't know how we've got onto mobile phones, but there we go. But yeah, it took me a long time to get my first smartphone, and I, like I say, I mean, this one is done. It's done well. Um, Considering that in November, it was it November? Is it October? When did I move into my old apartment? Yeah, considering how long I've had it, it's done well. Um, it's definitely deserves a medal for long service medal, campaign medal or two, medal for bravery. It's yeah, it's yeah, it's seen things. Yeah, it's been through the wars a little bit. The screen protector, I need to get a new screen protector because that is absolutely had it. The case I've had for quite some time, but it's done the job and can't complain. Uh, it's as I say, it's served its purpose. It's had some battle damage, but it's still working. I've gone through three charges with this phone, and I've had to dig out all the spare charges, and I've gone through three charges. It's mad that I've still got the spare plugs over there and the spare cables, but yeah, it's definitely served its purpose, and at some point we will consider um, getting a new one and upgrading a little bit. But yeah, I'm surprised. We're on a sports YouTube channel and we're talking about mobile phones and what we've had, and I think yeah, it's just weird. I've basically had smartphones the length of time I've been on the channel. So there you go. I got my first smartphone when I started my YouTube. So uh, I it's definitely been a journey. And yeah, technically, I started my YouTube with my tablet, which was my iPad Mini 2. Then I got my first YouTube laptop. Well, laptop. Well, not my first laptop, but my first laptop I did videos on in. Oh, when was that? 8th of January 2018. Um, and that lasted until last year. And it's over there. It died. It just reached a point where it just died. It decided I've had enough. I'm not going to work anymore. Goodbye and good night. And I don't think it will turn on again. It might turn on again, but it not. It's not healthy. So yeah, it's been a journey. It has been a journey. It's been a fun journey over the last 8 years. There's been some down moments. I think 2021 was a low moment. Not gonna lie, when I was not well and recovering. The 4 years ago, this time 4 years ago was the lowest point I think I've ever had in my life. And this last couple of weeks, the weather's been brutal, and it has impacted. It has impacted, my upload schedule and the channel a little bit. And so the view counts are a bit down, the watch hours are a bit down, channel engagement's a bit, channel growth slowed. But it's that time of year. It's July, August. People go on holiday. I'm not expecting everyone just to stop. Sports Boffin's on. Let's watch his content. The YouTube algorithm could work better. I definitely think that is a thing that could work better. But look, if England lose to Italy on Tuesday, I think the channel will explode. I think that would be a big discussion point. If England get through to the final, I think the channel will explode. If Germany beats Spain. Oh, so if we have a repeat of the last final 3 years ago, England Germany, I think that will be something. And if Italy get through, I think Italy Spain could be quite interesting because Italy have beaten Spain in recent time, and they play two different contrasting styles. And you know, I think Italy and Spain are the two teams most likely to be fresher because they haven't had to go extra time and penalties. They've had better discipline. So they haven't got players, suspended or injured. They look better disciplined. They look better organised, both sides. And I think Italy just woke up in that quarterfinal. They played really well. And look, I fell asleep during the Spain-Switzerland game. I think Spain were helped with the Swiss going down to 10. I think that did help them a little bit, but they were less dominant in that quarterfinal. They were a bit more conservative with how they played. So it's going to be interesting. And I think whoever gets through to that final, it's going to be a fun final. Spain are still favourites, but Italy are dangerous underdogs. I think Spain are the favourites, England second favourites, and I think Germany are actually the weakest side that have made it through to the semi-final stage with just how they've played and how badly they played in that final group game. How lucky they were against France. It's anything right now is possible. I think we could look. Some big nations have really underperformed at this women's Euros, which shows that the level of parity now in the women's game that wasn't there a decade ago. The parity level now in the women's game is much improved, and I think that parity came in when Japan won their World Cup. That's where the power shift actually happens, when Japan won the Women's World Cup. That parity started to come into the women's game, and it's continued since then. And the US and Germany are no longer dominating, and Canada have become a rising force in the women's game now, with being Olympic champions. And so, Australia are a lot more competitive with the Matildas, and so that parity in the women's game is definitely there. And it's a good positive sign that the sport is in a good place. It's up to rugby league and rugby union to catch up, and as other major international sports bring that parity when it comes to the team sports. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching. I've got to do some housework, get some dinner sorted, and get an early night because I've got a busy week at work. But no, I'm going to do. I've got some interesting video ideas. We have discussed some interesting topics, and somehow we ended up on mobile phones, which I find interesting. Like, what mobile phone do you use? Like, what? I think I also had a Motorola at one point as well, if I remember. I did have a Motorola flip phone as well. My first phone was an Ericsson flip phone where you flipped it out and you pulled the aerial out. It was an amazing phone. It still works. I still have it. It's in storage. It's a fantastic phone. The charger still plugs in. But was it on a 2G or 3G network? I think it actually still works and would still accept a normal SIM. Wouldn't accept a micro SIM, but it would accept a normal SIM card. So I'll have to dig that out and see if my mum still has it in some of my stuff that I have back at my mum's house. But I still have. I mean, that phone's got to be 25 years old. Has to be. I was 11 when I had that phone. And I was 12 when I had my first Nokia 3310, which was actually my sister's old phone. And then I got my first proper, my own Nokia 3310, and I got all the funky cases with it. And I kept changing the cases around like once. I'd have a different case each week. I had about 8 cases for it. Those phones were indestructible. And me and my mates used to go into Argos, and we would buy different phone cases for our Nokias, and that was our thing. We would change our phone cases. That was our thing. Going to Argos and picking out a phone case from the catalogue, and that was the thing back in the day. Was customizing your phone with your phone case. That was the thing. But there we go. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for all the questions this evening. It's always been entertaining as usual, and we always end up on a strange topic that is not sport related. Hopefully, I will see more new faces in live streams in the future. That will always be fun. As the channel obviously continues to grow, it'd be nice to see more new faces in asking questions and engaging as always. But from me for now, thank you very much for watching. And of course, I will have more content for you all very, very soon.